to Fiona and Andrew there. I'm sure colleagues will agree, a very powerful presentation, and really the ones that stole the show. No offence, Fiona or Andrew, were Kieran, Abby, Kenzie, Kong, and Kira there, with really powerful contributions. And I think it shows you that there is great work going on, but also that there is so much more to do, and we need to all be up to that task. And I'm sure that we are going to be committed to that moving forward. So I have a few comments in the chat. Councillor McGowan, followed by Councillor Linden. Councillor McGowan.
What a heartwarming presentation, and what wonderful work you're doing with these young people. The voices of a selection of young people were just amazing, and they said things like people listen to them, they feel safe, they feel wanted, the staff listen. Again, Kira said that she was safe. So before I heard the presentation, the one sentence that really rung true with me was in the part called The Voice. Integrate the voice of children and young people with strategic decision making. And the main word to me in the whole presentation is meaningfully. Make sure that the young people are listened to meaningfully. But the young people told us that was what did happen. So amazing presentation, and well done to everybody that's working on it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Agnes. Jordan?
Thanks very much, convener. Thanks to Fiona, Andrew and Alison for that presentation. First of all, a few times now I've seen that video, and Kenzie never fails to make me smile. A total breath of fresh air in his honesty, and I know that Derek Brown has spent some time with him, and he's just as much a character in his company as he is on video. Just two comments and a question, really, convener. First of all, I think an important update in relation to the introduction of the promise is, and it's obviously predated the presentation, is that the closing date of the 20th of November has came and gone for the oversight board of the promise, which is made up of people from public life that will oversee the introduction of the promise right across local authorities and beyond. So an important milestone. I would say, and it's no critique, Fiona and Andrew and Alison, I read through the presentation, and I did a search on Find as well to see if the word featured, and it didn't. And I think that we should be shy in future of ensuring this word features. It's the word love. The word love doesn't appear in the presentation. And if there's one thing that we continually hear from care experienced people is that they want to grow up with a lifetime of love. So I think that we should start to take the lead in ensuring that the word love starts to feature in these reports, and underpinning the principles that we want to see. So the question then, all of us have a role as corporate parents in realising the challenge of keeping the promise. So how do we all individually contribute to that ambition? And in particular, building on what Agnes said, to ensure we continue to actively listen to the voice of those who are care experienced in all of our communities, to ensure that their voice influences change on a very local level, on a pan-Lanarkshire level as well. Thanks, convener.
Thanks very much for that, Jordan. I think you're right, and I know it's something that you've raised in the past around the word love being included within these reports. I think it's an important point, and something that we can sort of reflect on moving forward. I think it's a fair observation that you've made there. I'll ask Alison if she can come in. Alison.
Okay, thanks, convener, and it's a big question. So first of all, on the love point, though, interestingly enough, we've just been having some debate in terms of the Children's Services Plan about love featuring. So there's still an opportunity to influence, as you know, and it's something that probably hasn't been part of corporate language before, but we are beginning to shift how we talk about young people and our relationship with our young people and families. So certainly something I think that we need to consider. In terms of members' contribution, I suppose it's about the support and challenge really across the board for the work that we're doing. We're in this for the long haul. We're not going to be able to make all these changes that will transform overnight. So we do need a continued focus. And I suppose not only I suppose, a critical eye when we are bringing forward reports about changes within the social work service or education and families, but across the board, I suppose, in our actions as a council, about whether when we're making other decisions, there's an appropriate focus on hearing the voice of our most vulnerable children, young people and their families, and just an eye to whether other policy decisions that we're making about the potential impact of those on young people as well. So I think keeping the promise is about a whole systems approach. It's not purely about what social work or even education and families can do. And I think if I would want people to take away any message from today, it would be about that, and that we all need to continue to challenge ourselves to make sure that we're putting the right support in place and be prepared to ask hard questions of each other if we're not. And obviously to be open to those young people within your communities, and make sure their voices are represented as well, not only here but in community boards, and as we move forward with the plan for North Lanarkshire.
Thank you, Alison, for that. Councillor Burrows. Bob?
Convener, I've got a comment and a question, if you don't mind. And again, like the previous two councillors, want to say well done to Fiona, Andrew and Alison for the presentation. I certainly now have got a better understanding of what the promise is all about. But I think it was right that the video clips bring it all to life. It gives that meat on the bone, and it's amazing for young people to be on the video. And I think the questions that was asked to them about what does care mean to you says it all. I think it's really exciting times. But my question, Convener, is about, this is the start of a long route, and I'm keen to know about the progress and how we're going with the promises. Alison touched on it slightly there, but for future reports back to committee, how will that be handled, Alison? Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thanks for that, Bob. Alison?
I think it's such a comprehensive programme of work that you should see that reflected in both individual pieces of work that are within our programme of work, and I'll touch on some of these later, and you've already heard, I suppose, about some of these in previous reports on development of kinship support, in the report on close to home, and the review of our intensive services. You'll hear about the link with our ASN review today, so some of that will be very much detailed in individual pieces of work. But I certainly would think that our children's services plan going forward, the wider partnership plan, will be much more built around the framework of the promise, and as well as things like the incorporation of UNCRC. And I'm happy really to take a steer from members about broader updates that they might want on a regular basis, just so that we can mark the overall progress of the programme of work here in North Lanarkshire.
I mean, Bob, just to add to that, I would expect us to be bringing comprehensive reports back to committee on a regular basis, but as has been stated there, it will be intertwined within so many reports going to different committees as well. Councillor Barclay. Claire?
Okay, thanks, Convener. Just to echo my colleagues, a great report, and thank you so much for everyone who's been involved in it. And it is so important to hear the voices of the young people that are involved in this. And it does hearten me that it's not just education and families or even adult health and social care that's involved in this. It's about making sure that every part of the council is looking at this, and any dealings that they have with young people, or any time they're bringing forward any new process, that they actually have that in mind. Because I know that there's been a couple of young people that I've dealt with, that it's not just been about talking to education or talking to social work. It's about talking to housing, it's about talking to finance, it's about looking at the overall process of what the council does in relation to that young person, whether they be care experienced or not, because it's how they experience all aspects of the council within their life, and it's not solely just down to education, families or social work that's actually affecting them, it's everything. So I'm really, really heartened about that and the direction of travel. So it's thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for those comments. I think you're absolutely right in that observation there. Okay, colleagues, those are the only questions I have just in the chat just now. Are we happy to agree the report with our thanks to the officers who have presented today and the young people for sharing with us their thoughts on where we are and where we need to go? Agreed? Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. That takes us on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 3 in your pack, which is the annual report of the Chief Social Worker. This has gone through Adult Health and Social Care. It's for joint approval of the two committees, and Alison will touch on the main points within the report at this time. Alison?
Thanks, convener. As you say, this report is the annual report from Chief Social Work Officer, so it's a retrospective report that provides information on activity, performance, developments within the whole of social work over the year 2019 to 2020. It follows a standard national format. We require to submit the report to the Scottish Government after it has been approved by council committees. And the format this year has been shortened slightly, I think, in recognition of the challenges of the service working through the pandemic. But you'll see that there's also a part at the end of the report that provides some information about our initial response during the pandemic and some of the issues that will impact on us in terms of the delivery of social work going forward. Because the report is retrospective, some of the content of the report you will already be aware of, as we've reported on some of the development activity and performance committee earlier on in the year. So you will already have heard about the development of our new kinship service, about the review of our intensive services, about our aspiration to support more of our young people experiencing care and indeed education closer to home. So I'm not going to speak in detail to those. The first section of the report deals with the broader governance. It's a standard request, so some of it will be familiar to you, although it's notable that in the last year we have completed the sort of disaggregation arrangements of social work into the new service arrangements around education and families and adult health and social care, but very much you'll see that we're maintaining strong strategic connections in terms of support planning across these two services, and clearly the presentation that you just heard emphasises how important that is. A couple of things maybe in the first section of the report to draw your attention to in relation to work we've picked up on over the last year. One at 1.5, the report talks about, and I suppose echoing what we've heard about voice earlier, about some of the development activity that we've been undertaking to improve our engagement and involvement of children, young people and their families with the delivery of support. One of the issues highlighted is the increased use of Momo, which is an app that allows young people to really let us know in their own way at the time of their choice what they would like to say to us about their support, their lives, their services. And you'll see we've invested quite heavily in that. And there's a link in the report that you might want to look at afterwards where two social workers talk about the difference that is really made in terms of making sure that we do hear those voices of children and young people. Similarly, at more strategic level, we have made changes in the Children's Services Partnership, as some of you who are members of that partnership will be aware, to move away from paying lip service to young people's voices and to have young people directly represented on that partnership itself. and to be able to bring to us issues and to shape the agenda going forward. So that's been important, as has the continued development of the Champions Board. Section 2 of the report talks about some of gives some information about activity levels, and I'll highlight in particular the ones that will be relevant to this committee around children's services and justice services, some of the key areas of development over the last year that you may not have heard about before. We have had quite a focus, both at a partnership level and at a service level, in trying to enhance our response to domestic abuse. I think my last report last year noted that we don't have specific national funding around delivery of, I suppose, programmes to address behaviours of those who we're working with because of convictions related to domestic abuse. We have nonetheless invested in the last year in a new programme called Up to You, and training of all our staff, so that we are better able to try and support changes in behaviours for those who have received convictions for domestic abuse. And alongside that, we do partnership work, and we work with children and families and our CPC colleagues on delivering a model called Safe and Together, which very much involves us partnering with non-abusing parents. And domestic abuse continues to have a high level of prevalence in North Lanarkshire, too high a level, and we are hopeful that in a sort of whole system approach to addressing that, we will begin to make a difference. Also, in relation to the world of justice, there's some information in the report about the use of the Outcome Star. It's a really great tool that helps us both at an individual level and at a strategic level measure impact of our interventions, and it's something that we would want to learn from its use in justice, which has been very powerful, and expand its use across the service as a whole going forward over the next year. In relation to children's services, you've already heard quite a lot about some of our new developments over the past year. You'll know that one of our areas for improvement is really focused around aftercare, and we've touched on that a couple of times, but we want to a more consistent offer support to young people who have experienced care, and not just for some people to have the best support in that area. And we're hoping to deliver that alongside partners through a new focus within our intensive services arrangements. There's information on statutory functions within the report, including our delivery of our responsibilities under MAPA, and that's our work with high-risk offenders. And the annual MAPA report was published earlier this week on the Council's website, and anybody who's looking for more information about that can find that there. But also in the field of public protection, we've been doing some innovative work within the Council. In particular, we've been one of 2 areas in Scotland that have piloted a new model of joint investigative interviewing. So that is the way that we speak to and hear about the experience of young people who may have either experienced abuse or witnessed crime. And the purpose of the new pilot is to do that in a much more trauma-informed and child-centred way. When young people are being interviewed by police and social work through those systems, we're hoping that that is a twofold benefit in terms of improving the evidence and us being able to address the underlying concerns that may have led them to having to speak to us, but also that their whole experience of that system is much less traumatic than it would have been in the past. And the early outcomes for us here in North Lanarkshire have been really positive round about that, and that will influence the national rollout. We're partnering with South Lanarkshire in that work and with police colleagues. The other areas of work maybe worth mentioning in that area too are around the work that we're doing to try and improve our ability to respond to extra-familial risk for young people through a partnership around contextual safeguarding, which addresses some of those harms that young people can experience in the community. And there definitely has been an increase in that over recent years in terms of challenges. And young people have increasingly complex lives, are vulnerable to criminal exploitation as well as sexual exploitation. We have some unhealthy peer-on-peer dynamics as well. And we're very much engaging with the Contextual Safeguarding Network and with partners across the council in new approaches to try and address those sort of harms in a much more meaningful way, and not to label young people, but to actually understand the context and the challenges that they're living with and try and support address that. There's also reference to the work that we've done in support to child abuse inquiry, and it's something that certainly I can provide more information on if members wish that. There are sections in the report that deal with finances, although none of that should be new to you. It's presented a little bit differently because it covers the whole of social work together, as it requires to do for this report. And you will see also some of the workforce developments and challenges that we are dealing with, detailed at section 4 in the report. Finally, the report provides information on some of our responses and the challenges we've experienced during the pandemic. We haven't, as with other services within education and families, they have continued throughout this period. We initially saw some reduction in demand, but that has picked up again. We have worked increasingly collaboratively to make sure that we're supporting young people, their families and communities deal with those challenges. And that's involved us working in a way where we are regularly looking at, I suppose, RAG rating caseloads, prioritising, making sure that we're getting the right support to children, young people and their families at the right time. We've got some challenges going forward because of some of the system that we operate in has also been impacted by COVID. So courts business has slowed significantly, as has children's hearing business for non-urgent cases. So there's a significant backlog there that impacts on the way that the demands on social work, but also and other partners, but also has seen decisions about some young people's lives deferred. And for young people in the justice system, sometimes people spend longer in remand as it takes more time to get through court business. And that will be a challenge for us going forward. Operating a people-based service where face-to-face interaction and complex dynamics is really important is also a challenge within the current environment where we need to be COVID safe, and clearly operating in a hybrid way where we have sufficient face-to-face direct contact in a safe manner will continue to be a challenge for the service going forward. And Andrew mentioned data, and one of the things we've experienced over this period is some of the weaknesses in our core case management system in terms of producing that data and being able to measure impact of intervention. So we've highlighted that as an area that we'll look at alongside the digital programme going forward to try and improve our ability to measure our impact and report. And finally, there's reference in the report to some of the massive policy challenges and changes ahead for us, not just in social work, but across this area of the service. We are charged with incorporating NCRC into, which is a good thing, into all of our activity going forward. As you heard earlier, delivering on the promise. Alongside that, there's other policy developments that we need to adapt to and encompass, including protection, the new age of criminal responsibility legislation, and in the adult world, and also impacting on children and families because of transitions and its impact on adult support, the whole large-scale review of adult health and social care, which will report in January. So all things, I suppose, to look out for and that we will need to accommodate and address locally and the impact of going forward. I wouldn't want to say any more than that, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. A very important, with a lot of information contained within it. Members open up the questions. I see Councillor Linden has got a question.
Just very briefly, Convener, one question for me, Alison, relates to the North Lanarkshire Assessment Centre, and I recognise that the figure, the ambitious figure, was 100 to be put through SVQ levels in terms of continuing that professional development and training. What was the ultimate figure at the end point of publication across those, and is it the intention to run a similar programme next year, recognising the challenge of COVID and perhaps trying to up the number that we're successfully through the programme this year?
Yeah, I don't have the figure. Oh, sorry.
No, on you go.
Yeah, I don't have the figure off the top of my head, Councillor Linden, but I can get that for you and come back to you with that. And absolutely, we do need to continue to do that. We have obviously targets in relation to supporting our social care as well as our social work staff in terms of gaining the qualifications that they need to ensure that we're delivering a quality service. So through our own assessment centre, and through the work that we're doing more broadly with our colleagues in training and organisational and development, and through the Care Academy, we'll be doing that. But I'll come back to you with the specific detail that you've asked for.
Okay, thank you for that, Alison. I don't see any other questions. Are we happy to agree the report? Thank you. Okay, that takes us on to our next agenda item in your packs, colleagues, which is the Standards and Quality report for 2019-20. Colleagues, this report is for noting. There's a lot of information contained within it. I'm conscious that you'll have had an opportunity to examine it thoroughly, so I'm not going to ask Janie to take us through the report. I will open it up to questions from members or comments or observations. Any comments or questions? Councillor McGowan.
Convener, I think Councillor Linden was in before Councillor McGowan. Sorry, Jordan. I thought that was from the last agenda item. My mistake. Councillor Linden.
Thanks, Convener, and I appreciate that. Thanks, Andrew. Two questions, Convener. First of all, a comment to welcome the outline, commitment and underpinning of the need to achieve equity, which I thought was a strong presence within the report when I was looking over it. I guess the question is, how do we benchmark and assess whether we're making sufficient progress as a council against the priorities outlined in the National Improvement Framework in terms of those standards to achieve equity? That's one of the key questions I think that came to me through the report. And then secondly, was an observation and a question which was great to see, is that there continues to be demand from education staff and partners for training on Solihull, and that there's several education staff that are requesting to be trained to be delivered. But I would like to know if the capacity is there to ensure that happens quickly, and to ensure that as many staff who are interested in undertaking that approach get the support to realise that ambition sooner rather than later. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks for that, Councillor Linden. Janie, can you pick up the questions here on the NIF and the Solihull training?
I can do. Thanks for those questions, Councillor Linden. So in relation to how do we benchmark and assess, and obviously we are part of the West Partnership, which is one of the ways where our education managers and other colleagues are working with other officers in the local authorities in the West Partnership. And also we monitor and collect the data on a regular basis, which we're doing just now actually through the collection of the school improvement planning and looking at the feedback we've had around the National Improvement Framework. So what we have going on just now is working with our head teachers in the clusters. We're going through our school improvement plans. We're looking at the data. Obviously, we are in a COVID environment, so it would be, to be fair, things are a wee bit different this year, as you'll appreciate, with additional workload that's brought to our head teachers. So we're working together, supporting cluster head teachers and also our education officers and monitoring the data that we're collecting to ensure that we are making inroads and closing the attainment gap in important areas which are outlined in the National Improvement Framework. So that continues to be a priority for us despite the challenges that this year has thrown. In terms of demand for training in Solihull, I don't know, Anne, if you would like to come in on that. I know that's an area that's covered under yourself. So if you don't mind, Councillor Linden and Convener, I'll just pass on to Anne, who's going to take that question. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Linden, for the question. Just to offer reassurances, one of our SAC professional lead officers is working very closely with colleagues to ensure that whatever training demands are coming in, we're making every effort to meet. We've worked really hard to put as much of our training on, or to put our training online, and this is a key aspect of it, particularly because the demand is so great for it. And you'll see from the report the significance of the work that's being done there. She's working very closely with our educational psychologist team on this as well, to make sure that we can meet whatever requirements are coming in as fast as possible, because I think that was a key point of your question, to try and do this as quickly and as speedily as possible.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Anne, I think cut off there at the end. Thank you. Councillor McGowan.
Thanks, convener. I've got three questions. I'll just ask the three of them and then get the answers at the end. In point 2.1, it tells us it's important to note that the Advanced Hire Consortium arrangements have moved to virtual delivery for 2020-2021. Can you tell me what was the cost of transport in 2018-2019 for the Advanced Hire pupils? I'm interested in the savings. Do you have figures for that? Second question, I think it's a brilliant idea, training seniors and supporting the mental health of their peers. And this seems to have been very successful. This is an excellent job the seniors are doing, very necessary. Do the seniors receive an award for this service? For example, a Diana Award or a volunteering award for this service? I'm sure there's an award they could get for that. My third question is on page 88. It's excellent that in 2020, with the unprecedented situation and taking into account that the estimates were rigorously quality assured by senior leadership teams and schools, that all centres' results were in line or better than the previous 3 years. My question is, with secondary youngsters self-quarantining at different times throughout the pandemic and missing 14 days of classwork every time, and teachers self-quarantining, what methodology are the schools using to ensure that all pupils are prepared for unit tests and other assessments in session 2020-21? To ensure that there are robust estimates if the higher and advanced higher exams are cancelled, which is being discussed at this present time. That's my three questions, convener. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for those questions, Agnes. In terms of the transport costs, I'm not sure if Janie will have that information at hand, but we'll bring Derek in on that. And Janie, are you able to touch on the other two questions that have been raised by Councillor McGowan?
Convener, if it's okay, if it would be all right, I can possibly handle the first and third, and then come back to Janie for the Advanced Hire Consortium and the thing about personal achievement. I think that might be the thing to do.
That's fine, carry on.
Okay, so in truth, it was probably around about £600,000 or £700,000 in transport costs went into the Advanced Hire Consortium processes, but it mainly was in relation to kind of things like taxi costs, etc. We'll get to the actual specific detail, Councillor McGowan, because obviously we wouldn't necessarily have it to hand in this meeting, but we will provide it for you afterwards if that's all right. On the wider issue of preparing children, young people for examinations, you'll understand it's a matter of critical importance to us at the moment. We understand that obviously that's part of a national programme. Obviously SQA need to set the standards for examinations. There need to be national arrangements in place with trade unions around about how the National 5 arrangements, for example, for this year will run. And then the current plan, obviously, notwithstanding any future decisions that may be taken at Scottish Government level, is still for examinations to run for higher and advanced higher as part of a diet. But as you say, Councillor McGowan, obviously there has been a pattern of some disruption to the learning and teaching this year, and there are different local authorities in different tiers. So all I can simply do is to say to you, we will engage in discussions about that at a national level. We will continue to make the case that there is a pattern of disruption for some of our young people that probably we need to advocate for on behalf of those children and people. I think, to be fair, Scottish Government are listening to that. I don't want to say too much beyond what I'm saying at the moment. And obviously we'll continue to engage in dialogue and monitor the decisions that may be taken there in update committee in due course. But I think probably the lessons learned from last year would be to the effect that really what we want to do is to get an exam system that's fair to the young people and is not prejudicial against them. And I think in the end, I think that's probably what you see in the data from last year. Notwithstanding the fact that there do need to be national standards, and it is very important that, as you say, we have rigorous quality assurance and robust arrangements in place to make sure that there is efficacy around about the estimations and the grades that are awarded by teachers, if we're going to have a system which predominantly is about teacher professional judgment. So hopefully, Convener, I've answered those two questions, and then I can maybe pass over to Janie, who can maybe pick up the Advanced Higher Consortium and the accreditation of personal achievement. Okay,
thank you. Janie, do you want to pick that up?
I will do. Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Convener. So in terms of the Advanced Higher Consortium arrangement, as you referenced, Councillor McGowan, we have moved it on to a virtual delivery. So I think it would be interesting, I'm sure, for elected members to note that we've now got 165 young people who are receiving advanced higher courses at this moment across 18 courses and in 15 schools. And in fact, if you add in as well our foundation apprenticeships and vocational, it comes to approximately 600 young people who are benefiting from online learning at this time. So there really has been real strides made in terms of the offer for young people from an online perspective. And obviously, as you've referenced there as well about the isolation, we've got, as you'll probably see in social media, we've got young people that are accessing live lessons and so on whilst they're isolating. So we're really proud that we're moving definitely in the right direction, although there's still obviously work to be done in terms of how we digitalise our curriculum. As regards the second question, you referenced mental health awards, and absolutely we are looking into how we can give accreditation to our young people for everything that they're able to do, and indeed in my second paper I'll make reference to that then as well. So we want to make sure that our young people are achieving and that they're recognised for that achievement. So we can certainly revert back to you in terms of which award specifically it would be, but yes, that is under consideration. Thank you. Thanks very much, Convener. Thanks very much, Councillor McGowan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those answers and those questions. Councillor Mooney is next. Nora.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'll make it really brief. Page 91 of the report, it states that curriculum planning and design should be increasingly informed by labour market intelligence. Now, whilst I agree with that sentiment, in view of getting it right for every child and looking at the promise as well that it should be child-centred, I would hope that we're not losing sight of asking the children what their aspirations and their ambitions are for the future, and that we don't dictate to them what they're going to be when they're older. Instead, we listen to what they want to be when they're older. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Nora, I totally agree with that. Janie, you want to add anything to that? No.
Just absolutely agree with that, Councillor Mooney, and we have a number of forums that we have ourselves and also that schools have as well, talking to them through their pupil parliaments and pupil councils, and even just through SurveyMonkey, that they're regularly asked about what their aspirations would be, and we try and make our curriculum pupil centred, so it's pupil led, so that actually it's based on the demand for what they would like to do rather than it being imposed upon them. So totally agree with what you said there, Councillor Mooney.
Thank you. Councillor Castles is next. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, my camera's off. I've been having IT trouble. I was told that might help, and I think it has. It's to take it back to page 67, and it's about the advanced higher, and that's impressive about the 18 courses, over 15 schools. But I know, unfortunately, some courses could not be presented, although there were some pupils who wish to take those courses. Is it possible to explore other options, whether that would be in colleges out with the mainstream secondary schools, or even with North Lanarkshire, should that happen again next year, that those courses could be presented? Thanks.
Okay, there's certainly been a lot of learning that's taken place in recent months, and a lot of dialogue that's ongoing as well with our partners. Janie, do you want to maybe touch on that? I know there's discussions in relation to the curriculum paper in terms of our partners, but do you want to maybe just pick up on Councillor Castle's point there?
I can do. One thing that I hope you find reassuring, as Convener has said there, obviously there's been a lot of learning, and the move to online, as you'll know from previous committee, was to be done over a couple of years as a pilot, and we've had to move it very, very quickly over a couple of months. So what we're looking to do, Councillor Castles, and we've actually started it, is have recorded lessons as well to support our young people in addition to what we've been able to offer this year. So we would, of course, be looking to work with partners from other colleges to support our young people as they themselves move to more of an online delivery, because we have been working in partnership with New College Lanarkshire, exploring for the future for next year what kind of courses we can offer, where our young people can benefit from the online and where they're not required to travel. So yes, I do appreciate that, and obviously not, where we have had issues, we're going to try and rectify that for next year so that all young people are able to access the courses that they want to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any further questions at this time. Are we happy to agree to note the report? Okay, thank you very much for that. That takes us on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 5 in your pack. This is in relation to an exciting new opportunity that is materialised for the Wishaw area. We have James McKinstry and Charles McCabe here to talk about this proposal in relation to a contribution towards a new town hub. I'll ask James if he'll take us through the substantive points within this report. James?
Thank you, Convener. I'll be quite brief because I think the paper is fairly self-explanatory. So the recommendations in the paper is we're seeking committee approval to support the bid that we've made to the Scottish Government for part funding for the delivery of a town hub in Wishaw. And if the committee approves this, we will know the outcome of this bid next month. And if the outcome were to be successful, we would prioritise this project and bring it in to the hub delivery programme. If it weren't to be successful, it wouldn't mean that this project would have any priority over any of the other unfunded projects that we have going forward. The background section of the report provides some detail of the Scottish Government learning estate strategy. It advises in paragraph 1.1 that the strategy was launched in November 2018, and in September of last year an updated estate strategy was produced at the national level, and authorities at that time were invited to make a bid. We bid for Christon Primary School, and the feedback we got from the assessment team that our project was too far progressed to receive funding. And the next phase of the bidding has opened, and as a result of that, we have put this bid in for a Wishaw, a town hub in Wishaw. And I think the key question in the paper is why Wishaw, and that's detailed from section 2.2.6. And I think why we've selected Wishaw is for a number of reasons. If the bid was to be successful, it would give the council a higher level of potential external funding coming into the council. In relation to all the town hub projects that we're looking at, it is the only area where we have 2 sites which are within the council's ownership. So that gives us a better opportunity in terms of deliverability of the project going forward, which should be something that hopefully will be of some benefit in the assessment at the Scottish Government side. We've went in with a secondary hub because we think it potentially gives a good opportunity for the council to kickstart the town hub projects going forward, and it also allows us to give consideration to other infrastructure in the area as well, primary schools, for example. If I could just refer you to section 2.10 of the report, and that just reiterates what was saying at the start. There is an opportunity for us to get some external funding here. It is a bid process. We will find the outcome of that next month. But if unsuccessful, the project would revert back to the unfunded list. Also, in terms of the secondary schools, which have still not been replaced, North Lanarkshire has got 23 secondary schools. We've replaced 11 of them so far. In terms of deliverability, the Wishaw project would score the highest, and in terms of deprivation, it scores the second in relation to percentage of deprivation, but in terms of the number of pupils that are in the top 3 deciles for deprivation, it would score the highest. So I think there's a good rationale for why we're putting this bid in for Wishaw. So the paper is presented to you today to the committee to give consideration to supporting this bid.
Okay, thank you very much for that, James. Councillor Fotheringham. Fiona?
Thanks, Convener. Well, obviously, as a local member, I'm delighted at this report. So I've got my fingers crossed that obviously everything goes to plan and the funding is allocated and we can make progress on that. There's a fabulous campus down at Clyde Valley and Orchard Primary, so you know we've already got that kind of sort of hub down there that is working really well. Now my questions, James has answered some of them already, but it was just the 2.7 regarding the actual site itself. Now, is there a preferred site, or am I reading that the community engagement will forum the preferred site to identify what the preferred site is, or is it, and how long again will it take for the next report to come back to committee with some more of the finer details? Thank you.
Okay, James, can you pick up on those questions? James?
Doesn't look like you can hear us, convener.
Okay.
So, like, maybe I can answer, and then if James can hear, he can maybe come in, or Charles can. Maybe Charles could pick up for James if possible.
Charles, can you hear? Can
yes,
you hear
convener. Yeah.
Okay. Did you pick up the questions there from Councillor Fotheringham?
Yep. On the site selection, absolutely right, Councillor Fotheringham. I think that was one of the key benefits with regards to the bid is that both sites are in council ownership. But what we had to make clear to Scottish Government is that we are not determining what the site is. It was made clear at Policy and Strategy on the 1st of October that there's to be meaningful community engagement. So it's the only site where, whilst we don't know which site it will be in, that we still have control. So that was a big factor in all the other things James said. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Both sites will be put forward to the community, and we will have discussions in the round to see which one of those two sites is successful.
And in terms of future committee meetings, obviously once there is clarity around it, Councillor Fotheringham, we can get a timetable for reports coming back to committee, because obviously there'll have to be a discussion around what else would be included within that offering, if it is going to be one of our town hubs based on the decisions that have been taken by council, and that's something that will need to be considered by this committee or by policy and strategy moving forward. So hope that answers your questions. I don't see any other questions. Are we happy to agree the recommendations within the report? Excellent, thank you very much. And that takes us on to our hub delivery programme, which is a progress update. I'll ask Charles if he can highlight the key points that are outlined within the report. Thanks very much.
Thanks, convener. As members are aware, this is a standing item which is presented to every second Education Committee to update you in progress in relation to the hub delivery programme. As such, the main changes to the report are contained within the appendices, and I'll signpost you to the various points within these. So within Appendix 1, you'll see that those projects in production, there's 3 which we've handed over fully within this last 6-monthly update: Cumbernauld Academy, St Edward's, Tollbury and Hilltop. We've also got 3 projects in design. 2 are at pre-planning stage just now. They are Carnbro, Sykeside and Cryston, and the Newmains project has now moved into formal planning stage. Moving on to Appendix 2, this provides you with an update on the pre-delivery projects, and you'll note that this now includes 2 new sections to reflect the decisions taken at Policy and Strategy at the start of October, one around engagement for the town hubs and the other around the feasibility for Abram Hill Community Hub. And further updates in these will be included in future reports, so this will become part of the standard part of Appendix 2. Appendix 3 provides an update on the community benefits, but as highlighted within section 2.1.3 of the report, the contracts have been unable to deliver the volume of community benefits we'd have liked due to COVID restrictions, so less of our young people can be on our sites as a result of COVID, which is understandable, but that's obviously hitting our targets. And lastly, Appendix 4 is a standard section within the report and provides members with an understanding of the timescales attached to projects from procurement to opening. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much for that, Charles. A few questions I see. The first is from Councillor London.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, Charles. Just 2 questions, Charles. In terms of section 3.3.2.2 of the report, the quote that struck me was the wider community must perceive the asset to be a community asset for all. I'm just wondering, I guess, in terms of how we do business, in terms of how we do it in practice, how can we actively make that the case to give that sense of ownership over and not have it looked upon simply as a council building at the heart of a community, but rather a community building at the heart of a community. And then secondly, just I guess an update question in terms of section 3.4.1 of the report, not preempting the policy and strategy agenda. There is only one meeting left, as far as I'm aware, before the end of the year. Will this report still be coming forward, as it's obviously an important paper in framing the strategic investment in our communities in terms of the outline of the phasing? Thanks, Convener.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Jordan, Charles?
Yep, thank you, Convener. I think in relation to the first one, you're right. It's a big commitment to make around the sense of ownership. I think I would refer you to the work we've been doing with the latest round of community hubs. So with the Christen Hub, for example, we've entered into what's referred to as an intelligent brief. So before the architects put pen to paper, we have a big part of the process at the start that understands what we want to deliver, and we talked. So at that, and we would expect to do this on a much larger scale for these projects. But at that particular project, we talked to the parent council, we talked to the teachers, we talked to the local community, we talked to the local organisations. So that's all facilitated through the communities team, who understand all of this, all of the organisations who may have an input. And so, for example, the brownies were, and the guides were at the meeting that we would possibly not have picked up, but they've got a guide hall right next to the proposed site. So these are all the ways we would do it. And the sense of ownership comes from that intelligent brief. So before we're starting looking at the costs or how it should look, we're more interested in what it means to the community. So that's how we intend to take that forward through this process. And you're right, following on from that, in 2.4.1, we were pushing it to try and get the report there. I think we're probably, in all honesty, probably going to be cycle 1 next year before we come back with the prioritisation matrix. We are still working on it, and we're obviously, as James talked about, we have started looking at it, but we want to get it right because we know we're going to get lots of questions around it. So I think we're probably into cycle 1 before we bring that back.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. Thank you. Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks for that. And as you'll probably have, it'll be no surprise if I look to Appendix 2 and I look to the Abram Hill Community Hub. And I'm really pleased to see to hear the answer, Charles, that you gave to Councillor London. And also, I know that in the conversations I've had with yourself and other folk within education and communities, how important it is to have for this particular one, because obviously it's in my ward, and the issues and the problems that are surrounding the Abram Hill area, and what would be resolved by the correct community hub being built, and how important it is to take the community along with us. So it's more the questions that I had, you've answered them, but it's more a comment to say thank you for this, and just to make sure to ensure that the community is consulted and listened to, because even if this particular project takes that wee bit longer, it's more important that the right building and the right hub is built for everywhere, but for that particular area, than maybe rushing it a wee bit and not coming up with what is actually ideal. So it's to thank you for that, but just to ensure that the community is listened to on this, because it solves the problems going down the line an awful lot further. You don't have objections when you've actually taken the community along with us, so thanks for that.
Yeah, again, another important point there, and I'm sure Charles will agree with that, and that's certainly something that will be taking place. Claire, you have that assurance, so thank you for that. Councillor Brandon McVeigh.
Afternoon, Convener. Afternoon, colleagues. My question is on Appendix 3 regarding the community benefit programme outputs. It's entirely understandable that the community benefits have been impacted by the pandemic, but I'm wondering what work has been undertaken to diversify the community benefit offer by those who are undertaking our contracts, because I think with folk have demonstrated real ingenuity and innovation about how they are progressing their business, and I wouldn't like to see community benefits falling by the wayside in that, because I think there really are community benefits that can still be delivered. I'm just wondering, so what work has there been done to diversify community benefits?
Okay, thank you. I see James is back on. James, do you want to take this one, or Charles, in relation to community benefits?
Yeah, I could hear you the last time, but my computer just froze and I couldn't get unmuted, so apologies for that.
No problem at all.
In relation to the community benefits that are in Appendix 3, there's an element of the community benefits which are already contracted, so it sometimes can be quite difficult to have tremendous flexibility in that, but we do have an ongoing engagement sessions as part of a contract and supplier management arrangement with all the framework providers. But what I'd like to mention as well is, as we look at the enterprise programme of work going forward, that is definitely something that we're looking at in terms of how we can maximise community benefits and get the maximum for North Lanarkshire out of these types of projects. It's already really good that we're getting good buildings, good services can be provided in these buildings as well, but we want to really push that boundary and really try and get more community benefits for the wider communities in North Lanarkshire to just take these projects forward. But I would like to assure the councillor that we are in regular discussions with our contractors on benefits which we can get from the projects going forward, and a good contractor would work with us on that.
Can I request a supplementary?
You can indeed, yep, absolutely.
Convener? So much of contracts at the moment, particularly those that are build ready, shovel ready, if you like, there's been discussion on contracts, and I just really would like assurance that community benefit, as well as the nuts and bolts and bricks and mortar discussions that are going on, that the community benefit element is not lost, because they are the things that are about inspiring children and young people to consider career diversification, to move away from stereotyping job roles. There's all sorts of things that we can really be doing here. For example, when sites are active, the connecting to local employability, to say that certain local support staff, it should be local people that fulfil those supporting roles on site, even if there are less of them. So it's really just to encourage that, and if I can have any conversation with anyone afterwards about that, I'm happy to do so, convener.
I mean, it's a very important point that Councillor Brannan McVeigh is raising there, and certainly one that's been discussed in a number of different forums in relation to that. James, is there anything else you would like to add? You recognise the points here?
Absolutely recognise the points, and I can give the assurance that is the type of things that we look at on an ongoing basis. We have supplier development programmes up and running. We have market engagement sessions that we're running on a regular basis as well. But I absolutely recognise the sentiments and the motivation behind the comments, and there's a desire there for us to try and do this better than what we're doing, and that's fully understood.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Councillor McGowan.
Thanks, Chair. My question is on the school replacement programme, and it's in the 2 new schools at Ravenscraig. Now, Councillor Valentine and I attended the consultation for the new schools at Ravenscraig, which sound really excellent, but I'm really concerned about their proximity to the new arterial route, or to the redeveloped arterial route from the M74 to the M8. And, I think there's considerations of air pollution, sound pollution and safety to be considered. I asked the question at the consultation and was told it was been fully monitored and provision put in place to mitigate this, but I haven't had any assurances in this. What are the plans for mitigating air pollution, sound pollution and road safety? And as Heather said, it's very important that the community are totally consulted in this. And there is a Ravenscraig action group has formed at the minute who are expressing concerns about the road passing so close to the new schools. And I don't know whether that can be answered today, but I just would like assurances that, all of these are being mitigated, because I wouldn't like the new schools, which sound brilliant in themselves, but they're not in an island. We have to think of what is around them and what is coming around them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Agnes. In terms of the specific development that Agnes has referenced there, James, is there anything you would like to say or can say at this point in relation to the issues that have been raised?
Yeah, I think I could probably respond in twofold. One is this is an active statutory education consultation that's been carried out by education colleagues at the present time. So the reporting on those matters would come back when that report comes back to committee. So I think it would be probably wrong to kind of go into detailed comments on it at this stage. But as part of the statutory education consultation process, it's important that all views that are put forward are recorded and are responded to, and I'm pretty sure that would be the case. In relation to the wider project development as we go forward, these type of matters would be considered as part of the planning process that goes forward. So I think that the point I'm making to the councillor is these points would be well made, and the council would need to respond to them fully going forward.
Okay, Agnes, are you comfortable with that? Thank you. Okay, I see no further questions or comments there. Are we happy to agree the recommendations contained within the report? Okay, thank you for that. Takes us on to our next agenda item number 7, which is our update, our standard report updating on the 1140 funded hours expansion. As you know, colleagues, we have now rolled 1140 out across the county, across the North Lanarkshire, and I'm incredibly grateful to Gerard and his team for the effort that has taken place over a number of years to get us to this stage. And Gerard and the team were recognised recently with a national award in relation to 1140, so we offer our congratulations to the team for that. And I would just like to place on record my thanks to everyone involved to get us to this stage, and to all of our partners as well. And I'll ask Gerard if he'll touch on the salient points contained within the report. Gerard?
Thank you, convener, and thanks for the kind words at the beginning. As you said, the first part of the report just, I suppose, gives that position statement that we are now fully implementing 1140 hours from the end of September. As you mentioned, there's been a lot of work within the early years team, and I don't know if James is still here, but I probably need to recognise that it's not just been the early years team. There's been the certainly asset and procurement, facility support, Thomas's team from a budgeting perspective, our own early years team, education and families, HR, and the comms. The danger of giving a list like that, convener, is sometimes you always forget somebody, but there's been a huge amount of work across the council with regards to that implementation. But we are absolutely delighted that we've been able to implement that for the children and young people in North Lanarkshire. The second part of the report talks about, and I think this is the one that will be of most interest, is regarding the infrastructure. And there's a table just under section 2.2.2, and I would just probably want to give a bit of an update with regards to some of the builds. So with regards to the new builds, I can now tell you that Petersburn, Broomlands and Calderview are all now operational. And with regards to Netherton, there's a new updated programme now we handed over on the 30th of this month. With regards to Abernethan, that'll be the 4th of December, and Innerleithen will be the 14th of December, which, is considering we've had that sort of period of lockdown, there's been a lot of hard work in trying to get these buildings in place and operational. I'll give an update about Forgewood, Cumbernauld and Heathery Park in a second. With regards to the extensions and adaptations, I can now say that St Augustine's and Holy Family, St Serph's, Stane and St Gerard's are now all operational, and the dates that are for the other remaining 3 as far as extensions and adaptations are the dates we are now working towards. So there's been a lot of work, as you can see, with regards to these particular buildings and programmes. With regards to Forgewood, I come on to Education Committee and I say the same thing over and over again regarding the issues around Forgewood. We hopefully have got a bit of progress now with regards to the work with Scottish Water. In fact, I believe there's been a joint piece of work with regards to the Forgewood Community Group, who are also very supportive of this. They know that this programme has been there and been talked about for a significant period of time, and we're hopefully working towards an estimated date now of June 21. With regards to the Cumbernauld Village, formal planning and conservation area consent applications have now been approved, and I'd also note the fact that there is increased costs from the original value for that particular programme. With regards to Heathery Park, I've noted there are concerns before about this one, but we are removing Heathery Park Family Learning Centre from our programme because of the previous points I've raised about the issues around the land, and we will bring to the next committee a report with our options and recommendations. Under workforce, there's been a significant amount of work in there to get staff in place, and despite the restrictions and challenges with COVID, you can see in section 2.3.4 all of the different types of staff that have been appointed. There's been a significant amount of work and joint work with our HR colleagues to get staff in place, especially in our new settings, but most importantly within our 1140 programme. The next part of the report is really at the heart of what the blueprint for 2020 was about, which was quality. Committee will remember the appointment of our quality officers team, and their focus will now be on the characteristics of quality outlined in section 2.4.1. I probably draw your attention to the fact that the early learning and childcare quality team will play a vital role in terms of support and challenge to ensure we've now got continuous improvement across all settings. You'll see in Appendix 1 the grades that we have for our family learning centres, our nursery classes, our funded providers, and also with regards to our childminders. I would ask you to note where the settings are graded as 2 weak, 3 adequate will receive targeted support to assist them in meeting the national standard, and that support will be given by our quality officers. Section 2.5 gives you an update about our facility support services. And with regards to the procurement, just to highlight, the framework is open at the moment, because this is where we do look for any new, for example, childminders that come on, would like to come onto the framework. That is now open for them to apply. As you mentioned, Convener, the procurement process that was undertaken in 2019 to deliver a flexible framework for the delivery of 1140 has been recognised, and I can not only can I announce the fact that we've got the award, but I can actually show you we've now got the award on screen. So we received that award on Monday. Absolutely delighted about the amount of work that has gone on at setting up that programme, and you can see in section 26.5 where it talks about why we received that award, and there's some great comments that have been made. You'll see in section 2.7 external funded provider commission payments that have been made and noted, and you'll see the payments we've made to the funded providers in Appendix 2, which equate to £5.392 million between the 16th of March and the 25th of September. In section 2.9, just want you to note the data under the admissions, and also to note in section 2.10 the transition support fund that was provided to our funded providers. Money was given from Scottish Government, which totals and has been awarded to our funded providers of just under £500,000. Under the finance section, just to note again an important point, at the moment as far as capital, we are still on an overspend of just over £1 million. But you'll note in the beginning of the infrastructure report, it talks about that we're taking legal advice about the additional cost that the programme overall that the council may face for the new builds and extension work. So we're still waiting to get what that cost may be. Convener, I think that's the main points of the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gerard, for that update. I see a number of questions. I'll come to Councillor McGowan first.
Thanks, Convener. Hi, Gerard. I have a question and a comment, Gerard, please. Firstly, I want to recognise the work done by the Early Learning and Childcare team throughout the pandemic for all their work in ensuring our shared 1140 ambition is realised. Well done. But in doing so, I also want to pay particular tribute to the work of the PVI sector. Coronavirus has been difficult for so many businesses and sectors within our society, and I can't imagine the challenge of supporting 1140, running a business, and dealing with the pressures, financial or otherwise, of a global pandemic. The PVI sector truly are important in the Council's plans for success with 1140, and by extension, our Scottish Government plans. Which brings me to the question. I know there's been regular meetings and dialogue between PVI and the Council following our interventions to support that dialogue happening. But I wonder if officers could outline what specific support has been provided, or crucially can be provided moving forward in the short term, with COVID-19 to the PVI sector, and more long-term, any additional opportunities for financial support or otherwise for these crucial partners. Thanks, Convener.
I mean, I'll maybe ask Gerard to reiterate what he stated within the report, which highlighted the financial support that has gone to funded providers over the course of the pandemic, and the additional funding that came from the Scottish Government, welcome funding from the Scottish Government that went specifically towards the funded providers. So I think certainly there has been a lot of financial support that's been passed on during these challenging times, and passed on at that 1140 rate as well, which I think is actually which is quite important. Gerard, do you want to maybe just pick up on those points?
Yes, Convener. I suppose we are also note the fact of how important our funded providers and childminders are. It is a partnership. We cannot do without them, and we have tried with a whole array of different approaches to support them. And I probably highlight the following. So I mentioned about the GO Award, and that was recognition for that 2020 to 23 framework which was rolled out, and there was training specific to the tender process that was actually provided. I would also say the fact that we listen to the funded providers, we now pay them on a monthly basis in advance. I probably want to note that previously we paid them quarterly. There's also support and guidance through the annual admissions process. There's also access to our core early learning and childcare team to provide support when required. You'll remember when we had the recent floods, for example, and we supported one of the funded providers in finding alternative locations. That's just an example of that support that we give. There's also things like child protection, GovFec, and recently I provided COVID-19 guidance to our funded providers and childminders. So that's probably from an operational point of view. From a communication point of view, we've learned a lot. We've listened to our funded providers. We've now got a calendar of meetings in place. We've also now set up a working group which meets on a 4-weekly basis, which has got representatives from all the sectors. There's early learning and childcare newsletter, which includes now articles from our funded providers and childminders. Over the last few months, we have met with the funded providers and childminders on a weekly basis to prepare and review contingency planning in regards to COVID, and that was one of the big issues in the past. I mentioned, and I think it's important to mention about the quality. You mentioned about what support's given moving forward. 3 of our private funded providers receive funding to appoint an equity and excellence lead. The quality officers have been in post from June of this year, and they have been aligned to both private funded providers and childminders. They provide a linked role. They have got responsibilities to provide support and challenge to ensure all establishments meet the national standard, as I mentioned in the report. We've also got a working group that is set up to review the admissions paperwork. And lastly, I'd probably say that under the quality, the manager in settings been offered their full funding. So it's approximately £4,000 per person to complete the BA qualification to meet the requirement of the SSSC. And again, that was a request from the funded providers to ask for that support. What I mentioned within the report finally, as far as the financial support, I think the Scottish Government did recognise the additional burden that the lockdown had and COVID has had on our funded providers and childminders. And that's why we have processed, as it mentions in the report, 69 applications, which total, as I mentioned, just under £500,000. I think as an early years team, we have and do recognise the need for our funded providers and childminders, and we have, hopefully, through the sort of operational, the communication and the quality information on top of the additional funding we've given, hopefully shows you, Councillor McGowan, the support that we have given to our funded providers.
Okay,
thank you, Gerard.
Thank you,
Gerard.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Thanks, Convener. And I'd also like to echo the comments from Councillor McGowan in relation to the ELC team for all of their hard work, especially during this difficult time. I've got 2 questions. One, the first one is in relation to funding follows a child, because it would appear that funding still doesn't follow every child in every circumstance. And as my amendment was not successful at the last Education Committee, I wrote to the Minister for Children and Young People to get to the bottom of the phrase, which is funding follows a child. And within the response from Marie Todd, she did write to me and she said, as you may know, funding follows a child allows parents to access their child's funded ELC from any provider in the public, private or third sector who meets the national standard, has a place and is willing to enter a contract with a local authority. So for clarification, can I just ask why parents haven't been able to access the funding, if that's what the Minister within the Scottish Parliament is saying? And question 2 is on future funding. If you can give us an update as to what discussions you've had with the Scottish Government in relation to funding for next year in relation to 1140.
Okay, I'll bring Gerard in a wee second. Obviously, as stated before, there is a legal framework in place with the funded providers. I think that's absolutely clear. And there has been no concerns, to my understanding, raised by the Scottish Government in relation to our rollout here in North Lanarkshire. There's regular dialogue with the Minister and with our officials, and there has not been a concern raised about the process that we've followed here in North Lanarkshire, or there would be presumably government intervention in that regard. So I'll bring in Gerard to maybe expand on that, and then Derek if he's wanting to comment as well. Gerard?
Convener, I'll probably just add to the point you've made. I came here to the Education and Families Committee with a framework that's been recognised, a framework that opens every year, because that was one of the big things in the past where the framework didn't allow that. But we did have an agreement, and as an officer of the council, there is a legal duty on me to ensure that I come to committee with a specific framework. It was agreed at £11.8 million, and that is the money that has been allocated there, and that is basically our policy that we are implementing on behalf of the council. As far as the future funding, it's a repeat allocation of funding that comes in. Thomas, I think, is online, that probably be able to give a wee bit more, but it's the same funding will repeat year on year as far as early years continues.
Derek?
Yeah, I mean, I think all I would say, other than what Gerard said already, is officers follow council policy and regularly bring policy updates to members for members to decide and to advise and to keep us right. When we're taking forward 1140, there's a few things to bear in mind. First of all, resource is finite. We have to drive out best value. We have policies about developing our own state sector nurseries. What was important to our politicians was that if you were in SIMD 1 to 4, you were within 1 kilometre of a state sector nursery. That was important in terms of our planning. And that therefore means that we have to make sure we get best use of that resource. In addition, we set a plan with Scottish Government on a notional figure of 23% of our volume being catered for by the PVI sector. And that's part of an agreed framework. And there was resource around that. So what we've got is an agreed plan with Scottish Government. It's a legal framework supported by excellent practice in procurement, which is now being rewarded by a national award, which Gerard has got beside him. And we continue to learn lessons. And I think what will happen as we go along, because obviously if you remember what I think in a sense we've kind of underplayed this to a certain extent. The great achievement of switching on 1140 and being the first big council in Scotland to do so has been done at the time of COVID, whilst in recovery, whilst everybody was experiencing that pain and that angst of the COVID recovery. We switched it on, which I think is quite a remarkable achievement by the team. We want to work in partnership with our funded providers as per our agreed frameworks. Of course, we work in Scottish Government, and I've said before in this committee, our plan for 1140 is the Scottish Government's plan in North Lanarkshire, and it's North Lanarkshire's plan for implementing 1140, and it is both things. So I would simply say officers follow the policies. We brought these policies through repeatedly, and we continue to work. And I would say about next year, we're going to learn lessons. We're going to refine our processes. We want to get even better at this. And we want to make sure that our funded providers are well catered for in the longer term as well. And of course, we'll be bringing forward proposals in due course to make sure that's true. But I just want to thank the funded providers. And I want to thank Gerard and our own local authority staff, and indeed our childminders as well, who are a specific group of kind of private, voluntary and independent sector partners. And we are so lucky to have so many of those in North Lanarkshire compared to other local authorities. So for me, I just want to celebrate the success.
Thank you very much for those comments. Councillor Larson.
Thanks, convener. Just like my colleagues, just want to take a second to recognise that it's not been certainly an easy task at all to deliver provision of this scale through a global pandemic. So well done to everyone involved, both at delivery level and of course at service level. I've got questions on 3 sections of the report, 4 if you want to indulge me. I'm picking up on something that Councillor Gallagher said a wee minute ago. I'm a sincere advocate of promoting parent choice, and I think that promoting parent choice pedagogically is recognised as creating accountability to parents. It's also, it can act to incentivise centres to meet the needs of young people, and it can also create trust and confidence, and with very young children I think that's hugely important, and ultimately it can allow parents flexibility and independence when it comes to work or education or other family commitments. And I suppose the 2 questions I want to ask on this section are, why are we not allowing parents to exercise their choice in relation to their first place preference when the places do exist? And I know that it's only a small amount and it's been very difficult, so I'm going to bear that in mind, but also as a reflective and evaluative council, what ambition do we have to promote parent choice moving forward? I'll go into the next section. Just the revenue update outlined in section 2.12.3, I think it's on page 123. Council notes an underspend of £6 million. I know it's quite a complex picture there, but I'm not fully getting my head around it. Does this underspend have any bearing on the PVI sector? And if so, what is that bearing? And then section 2.10, you discuss the funding allocated to PVI centres and other centres through the Scottish Government's Transitional Fund. I think there were 69 successful applications. I'm wondering how many applications were unsuccessful. And then lastly, I'm sorry for giving you the fourth, but lastly, just in Appendix 1, you've got the 4 pie charts. The 4 pie charts frustrated me a wee bit because it's a black and white sort of grayscale, and I found it difficult to understand. But I just think that with the pie charts being there and it providing such a general picture, a wee bit of analysis, you know, would help us to understand their inclusion there a wee bit better. Thank you.
Okay, a number of points here. I'll bring in Gerard to pick up on them, and maybe Thomas O'Hagan might want to touch on the financial question that you raised there, Kirsten. So I'll bring in Gerard first. Gerard?
Thanks, Convener. With regards to the first question about parent choice, the question you said or asked was about why we're not allowing parents to choose. We do. But before 1140 programme was implemented, there was always the first, second, third choice that was asked of parents and carers because of the fact that sometimes there are the capacity issues there. With regards to the specific point you're saying there about when parents don't get the first choice, you have been, like many councillors on here today, have emailed me and the early years team, and not only do we respond to you, but we're actually making phone calls to parents and carers to try and understand what their specific needs are with regards to the childcare. And that is something that goes on. You're right, they don't always get exactly what they're looking for. And it goes back to Councillor Gallagher's point. There's a finite resource, and that resource is the £11.8 million. As Derek has already mentioned, is the fact that there's lessons learned. The early years team, myself, us as Education and Families want to get better at this, and we are listening to the funded providers who are making similar points to us, providing us with different scenarios and what would we actually do. But what I would say is we try to provide as much, and you can see there by the sort of charts that are there about admissions, as much choice available to the parents and allowing them to get their first choice in there. However, there is a framework, there's a legal framework that is actually there. The ambition you talk about parent choice, yes, that is what we want to get to. And I can only say the fact is that we are learning lessons. We're going to try and fine tune things. We're going to try and make sure that parents, as far as our admissions process, advertising it more, and we already do, so that we don't have as many late applications coming in. With regards to the criteria, the funding, the transitional support, now I'm doing this by memory, Councillor Larson, so hopefully I'm right, but my understanding is that all of the providers, and then there's a set criteria by that was then there by Scottish Government, and it was only some of the childminders then that could actually apply. The specific of the criteria I can't actually remember off the top of my head, but I will get that email to you so you're quite clear about how many people didn't get that sort of additional funding. But I believe that everybody applied. My understanding is everyone received funding. With regards to the last part, the last question about the 4 pie charts, apologies about it being in grayscale, but considering now we're moving on to what was at the heart of the blueprint, i.e. the quality, I think it's important to note as a starting point where we are now that we're in as far as 1140 programme, with regards to what our ambitions are, to look at those grades of 2 and 3 and to improve upon those. And I take on board what you're saying, that maybe we need to expand a wee bit more. You can see this report is so big with so many different areas. that I have to report on. I think over time, when infrastructure seems to drop off, I will try and develop more on the quality to actually show you the work that the team has started to do. Those relationships have developed now with our funded providers and childminders, but I will take on board your comments and try and give a bit more detail as far as the work that we're actually doing as far as the quality is concerned. And Thomas hopefully is there. I think he is, yes. We'll give you, I suppose, an update just on that last point you asked about the revenue. Thomas, would you be able to take that point?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. In terms of the long-term funding for the programme, next year, financial year 21-22, is the first year that we'll have a full programme, and the long-term award that we'll get from the government going forward is £37.9 million. However, the government hasn't gave councils the money when actual activity takes place. To support the government's cash flow, they have allocated money over a 5-year period. So, for example, in financial year 2019-20, the grant award we received was £20.5 million. For the current financial year, it's £34 million. And as I said, that grant award is up to £37.9 million. So the in-year £6 million underspend that you have seen for last financial year, that reflects that we've received some grant in advance of need. The Scottish Government are aware that councils have received grant in advance of need, and there's been ongoing discussions with local authorities in terms of what authorities are allowed to do with that grant. And the government have made it clear they do want that grant spent within the early years forum. And one of the areas that they've said to local authorities that they can use to spend that, if you like, in-year surplus is in terms of your capital programme, because the government has acknowledged in terms of the capital awards that councils were given for this programme, they were really tight. So in terms of the NLC capital award, we received just over £20 million. And as Jared mentioned earlier on, we already have a capital projected overspend. We might potentially have an increase in that overspend linked to the pandemic. So that is a potential option the council has in terms of using that spare revenue surplus that we have. As I say, the government has made clear that any surplus we have does have to be used within the early years forum. And in terms of our financial planning over the next 3 years, that surplus will be used within early years, so we can give that commitment that the money will be used, as I say, within the early years world.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Linden is next.
Thanks, Convener. A couple of questions and comments. I'll try and keep them brief. I echo Councillor McGowan's points on the work that's been done by the team. I don't think that can be underplayed, how important it is that the rollout of 1140 has happened against the backdrop of a global pandemic. And I think that the ELC team need to be absolutely recognised for that. I'm glad to hear that there's been an award recognising an element of that, and personally the team deserve a lot of credit. And also note what was said around the PVI sector realising 1140 ambitions against a challenging financial backdrop for them, ultimately as businesses. In that context, maybe a couple of questions. I think it's helpful Kirsten asked the question about the £6 million underspend, because I don't think that, whilst the report reads like that, I think Thomas would agree that's not necessarily what it is, and I think he's articulated that, Thomas. The question I had is just to clarify, in addition to what you've said around revenue for capital, I understood you've mentioned the building costs of about £1 million in terms of an overspend. I understood there was potentially some staffing projects as well associated with that, and the delays in realising some sites, which means that money can be used for that as well, so it will benefit the project. The other thing as well, Convener, that struck me is the fact that throughout today, and it could be a semantic point, and forgive me if it is, but I do think it's important, is that all of us thus far have referred to the PVI sector as funded providers, and I recognise that that's the language that we use within the council, but I do think that language is important And there was a time where we called them partner providers. And I do think that that is important as we move forward in recognising that the 1140 programme, as Derek mentioned, can't be realised without the support of the PVI sector. And perhaps our language should reflect the importance of that partnership as we move forward, and recognising that we're all ultimately funded by government and by the public to deliver these really important services. So perhaps we could revert to using that language of partnership as a means of addressing some of that important work. Another question, convener, relates to the working group of partner providers. I would just welcome a wee update on the context of some of that work. I recognise that they've met. I recognise that Gerard mentioned there has been weekly meetings, and it's great to see that engagement taking place on a regular basis. It's exactly what members asked for. I just wondered how that had been received by our partner providers, and if that had been a positive development. And then finally, convener, if you don't mind, a reiteration, I guess, somewhat of a question that Councillor McGowan asked. I wonder if Gerard and Derek could outline, or Thomas, what support, if any, was given during the pandemic, either through Education and Families or indeed to support through enterprise and communities to access any government grant funding, etc., if that was the case, and what consideration, if any, was given to additional support as we move forward to recovery, recognising the difficult situation that we're all in right across the board with the pandemic. And then, very finally, convener, apologies, it's a part of that question, is that Gerard mentioned that the framework moving forward would involve the embedding our increased focus on quality. And I just wondered, Gerard, when you anticipate that we'll start to see those reports starting to come forward that embeds quality and everything that we're doing in terms of the detail, and perhaps looking forward to future frameworks. Thanks, convener, for your time.
I mean, a number of questions there, Councillor Linden. I'll bring the officers in, but I mean, certainly from I think the very first report that came to this committee, actually, I think it came to the former Education, Youth and Communities Committee, you know, in relation to 1140. The first thing I said from the chair was the only way we're going to be able to deliver 1140 funded hours is by working in partnership across the board. That is, in my opinion anyway, what has taken place. It's the only way we've been able to get to this stage. So certainly, you know, the funding providers, as they have been referenced to previously, are our partners. There's absolutely no question about it in delivering this programme across North Lanarkshire. So you've asked a number of questions there. I'll bring in Derek first, then Gerard, and Thomas maybe want to comment as well. Derek?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Councillor Linden and yourself there, convener, around about the language about the partners. Absolutely. So just to take that on board and accept it, and thank you very much for the reminder, Councillor Linden. I think it's a well-made point. So all I can say to you is, just in terms of the business support at the time, and I think we did actually talk about this in the previous committee, but it's worthwhile just restating it, just for reassurance of members. We were given an advice note from Scottish Government about the importance of the partner providers at the start of the pandemic, and that said that we should continue to pay them at 100% of contract value. We had taken the step, you know, which was totally unique in Scotland, I think, certainly in a number of big authorities, of accelerating, using phasing money to accelerate the 1140 phasing in year one for our funded partner providers in the first instance. So we had switched on 1140 and our partner providers first last year. Therefore, when the pandemic hit, we continue to fund them at 100% of the 1140 hours contract value. Whereas other local authorities across the country, if they were continuing 100% funding, would have been 100% of 600 hours. We were almost given twice as much money. And the reason why we brought the previous report to committee with all of that detailed was so that members could see the extent of that funding during the pandemic. So that, I think, probably was reassuring. And one of the attractions in coming and working in North Lanarkshire, of course, is our attractive rate, which was over a 3-year period, which I think probably attracted lots of partner providers to want to kind of bring their business to North Lanarkshire, because obviously it's more attractive, the rate of 555 compared to the 531, which is advocated by Scotland Excel, etc. And in addition, on the business support grants through our business support team, and I was in various committees recently where that's been commented on by members who are on this call, the excellent work of that team, the Yvonne Weir team, etc. There was an awful lot of additional supports went in through that team to all of our businesses in North Lanarkshire during a very difficult time, including in that, obviously, our partner providers. And obviously, whilst they are our partners, and I understand the language, and it's definitely very important to say, I think members would also understand it's incumbent on me to say that we're also governed here by a procurement framework. We're governed here by some legal frameworks which are around that, and that nonetheless they are also contractors. So I would simply make that point as well. And therefore, what is important is that we've got that sustainable source of funding, and that's one of the reasons we have the 3-year procurement framework at £11.8 million per year at the £5.55 per child per hour, as per policy which has been set for us by members in previous committees. And I'll just pass on to Gerard, if that's okay.
Thanks, Derek. With regards to the working groups, Councillor London, the focus of the working groups is being the reviewing the admissions paperwork, protocols, and the contingency planning during this COVID, and planning for any other scenarios. Along with that, there's been advice and guidance provided in there, and approaches to training and development. The second part of that question, I believe, was, is it been welcomed? Absolutely. As you use the word partnership, I think there is partnership there. I think there is good joined up working between the early years team. There are a number of hurdles that we face on a regular basis through our discussions with our partners, but these are things we talk through. But specifically regarding the working group, yes, I think it is a key step forward that we have a small working group that then reports back to the wider group. With regards to the final point, which I think was regarding the framework and specifically on quality, you remember within the blueprint, it talks about that we are the guarantors of quality. And I think this is a first step at outlining our approach moving forward. And yes, we will bring further reports, as asked previously by Councillor Larson there, future reports that will give more detail regarding that. And as I say, now the fact that we've got the quality officers that I have to say have been dealing with a lot of inquiries around COVID, etc. We do want them to form those relationships with our partners to ensure there is sort of joined up working, and that quality is at the heart of what we're now doing. And these quality officers, I think, have a lot of experience that they can give, and support that they can give, and guidance to our partners moving forward. So finally, I would just say that we will bring back, as I said to Councillor Larson as well, bring back further details. I can see there is interest in this specific area, and that is something we will focus in on with regards to future reports to committee.
Thank you for that. Councillor Barclay. Claire?
Sorry, apologies, it was on mute there. Thanks, convener. Like my colleagues, I would just like to commend the Early Learning team for all the work that they've done. And I think it's really justifiable that they got the award, and it's quite a nice trophy too. I think what has been really excellent is the planning, even around the different early learning centres or nurseries that are still in the process of being built, that it was factored into the equation to make sure that community centres were used to start up the nurseries. So the 11 hours 40 got going, but people within the community actually had a nursery in their community, although it wasn't the building they would be in. So I really want to commend the team for doing that. Gerard, excuse me, if I could just take you back just to something that you did. Again, it's one of my favourite subjects. It's the Cumbernauld Village. Now, you'd said that an increase in costs. Now, I can understand that because obviously there's been a delay. There's had to have been the archaeological survey, but What has that been solely what the costs have been, and will that have any effect on the actual plan of the nursery? Is there going to be any changes to what the final plan is? Because that side of it would concern me, or is it something that those costs will just be absorbed and have to be looked at on that side of it?
Okay, thank you, Claire. Gerard?
Councillor Barkey, thanks very much for kind words. With regards to, you'll know that there was consultation with the community, and we'll certainly not be going back on that. I think that the community will welcome that first class building that was discussed, so there'll be no changes to that. With regards to the specific reason for the increase, I'll email you directly with what those costs are, but certainly I'd just like to give you a guarantee that what we discussed with the community is what they will get. We're not going to start changing designs or anything like that, so I can give you that sort of guarantee.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to convey my congratulations to the ELC team and the Economic Development team for the award. But you kind of expect me to say that as Chair of the Supplier Development Programme, who is the partner and the recipient of being the award winner. But it demonstrates the fact that ELC were bold. They were a first in Scotland about taking forward this procurement training, early information to the sector to enable those sitting out with the public sector to engage in training to be bid ready. That's what Supplier Development Programme does, and it's excellent to see that the mindset of procurement has moved beyond the bricks and mortar services and that kind of supply chain and materials, and actually onto the people providing, people supporting services as well. Because ultimately this is about community wealth building and about local employment. And it's on that I've got a question, Convener. It's on 2.3.4 and it's about the PVG delay, and I'm just wondering if 35% of the candidates were awaiting return of the PVG as the report was written. I'm just wondering if there's been progress there to enable those individuals to take up post, because ultimately we don't want people hanging in this interim place. We want people working. And the second question, Convener, is on 2.3.2. It just said the aim was to have all candidates in post by the end of November. We're nearly there, and I just wondered if there's progress on that point too. Thank you.
Yeah, no, excellent points here, Heather. Certainly the first one that's been was raised at conveners as well around the PVG. So, Gerard, are you in a position to update the committee?
I know lots of excuses are made because of the pandemic, but there was a longer waiting time because of the new processes with regards to PVGs. But just last week I spoke to the early years team, and I know that there had been an increase in those as far as those receiving their PVG certificates. But what I'll do is I'll email you with regards to both those points to find out exactly where we are and an update on the numbers that are now in post. So I could give you those. I don't have those figures in front of me, but I can get them to you.
Convener, the reason I asked the question is because there's been a demonstrable shift in the way in which early years posts have been evolved and developed here, and I just think it's excellent that we're now at this late stage where we can see nigh on all of these posts filled, either through a retraining ambitious support for folk within the authority as authority employees or coming in to the authority. So I just think it's really about realising our local ambition for local people to take in those jobs. And as a final point is to say, Gerard, you spoke about the support that's been given to local partner providers, and one of the partner providers in my own community, Kidstore, that was really badly affected by the flooding. The service moved swiftly to enable hardly a day of service to be broken and providing that new service, and indeed to enable them to get back into their home building at a higher standard now to be delivering excellent quality childcare in Kilsyth and the surrounding area. So my congratulations and thanks to the team, because it isn't all about is about that willingness to be able to support when adversity strikes, and not just on, I feel like, some of the traditional expertise of support that we would expect.
Thank you very much for those points, Heather, which I know Gerard will be taking on board. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Convener. I think it's important that we remember that the context of all this is this was obviously a very, very ambitious programme from Scottish Government, probably one of the most ambitious programmes around early childcare provision, etc. They've actually struggled to deliver it across the whole of Scotland, there's no doubt about it, through financial reasons, other reasons, they've really, really struggled. And it'd be good to put context in future reports about how we compare to other parts of Scotland. Because some of the dialogue, yes, very complimentary, but it's questioned almost the performance of 1140. The evidence shows we are by far the best performing deliverer of 1140 in the whole of Scotland, and continue to be. 95% of people get their first or second choice, 88% get their first choice, 88% get their first choice. And I'm sure if we compare that to other places in Scotland, we're probably at the top. In terms of the partner providers, the critical role they play, but it's really important to remember during the pandemic, the 5-month period, we paid £5.3 million to the private providers to support them. So we were stepping up, and I'm sure again that's out of context to other areas in Scotland. You look at the new builds, we've got 9 new builds going on site, 8 extensions, etc. This is by far the biggest 1140 programme being delivered anywhere in the country. There's no doubt about it at all. They'll provide phenomenal support for young people as we go forward. And I think we should keep celebrating what we're doing, keep celebrating our achievements. It doesn't help, actually, Convener, when we had a situation in Parliament, you previously referenced that the last meeting where the First Minister stood up and told something that's completely untruthful around North Lanarkshire. So we'll have to make sure we get the language right, because we're here delivering the programme, delivering what the government's asked us to deliver, and doing it way above any expectations and better than anywhere else in the country. So we need to absolutely celebrate that. I think we need to in future put some Scotland-wide figures comparing it to other areas. Just one quick question, Gerard. Thank you for updating us on Fordwood. That's really, really helpful. In terms of, did you mean June 21 to start, or was it June 21 you're hoping to have it completed by? Thank you.
Gerard, on the Fordwood.
Yeah, and just to add another point, we have regular meetings, Councillor Kelly, with the civil servants who want an update on North Lanarkshire's progress. And when you look at what we have, the amount of partner providers we have in the framework, and also what's commented on is not only the fact of delivering the programme, and that's fully delivering the programme, the amount of childminders that we have involved in our partnership there as far as the framework and may increase yet again is quite incredible and is recognised when we are speaking to them. With regards to Forgewood specifically, that is an estimated date that we're hoping that it would be completed by. We think we're at that final stage now with Scottish Water, and I think there's a meeting lined up, Councillor Kelly, with yourself and Councillor Gallagher, just to provide a further update, and I'm going to bring a colleague from James's team just to ensure that the questions you need answered will be answered, because I know this is one that's been sitting on our programme for a considerable amount of time.
Thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerard. Thank you, Councillor Kelly, for those comments on the progress that's been made. I don't see any further questions or comments on this report. I think there's been a number of people who have contributed, so thank you very much for those questions and for the comments on the fantastic achievement that collectively we have worked to deliver here in North Lanarkshire, and thanks to our partners and everybody who's been involved in delivering that. And Gerard, as you can see, Gerard takes that award everywhere he goes. Everywhere he goes, he takes that award with him. You know, as I see Janie O'Neill's nodding her head there, absolutely, she knows it's true. Anyway, can we agree the recommendations that are outlined within the report? That's great. Thank you very much for that, colleagues. Takes us on to our next agenda item, which is a progress update in relation to the curriculum. Janie is going to take us through this, a really important report, obviously recognising some of the decisions that have been taken previously as part of the budget, and this is the realisation of that, and our desire to consult further on what some of the plans may look like. So I'll ask Janie if she can take us through the main points of the report. Janie?
Thanks very much, Convener. So as Convener said, this is a progress update, and you'll recall that in May 2020 there was a report about the revision of curriculum arrangements, and this is now telling you about the work that's been going on between May and October, despite the fact that for part of that time we were obviously still in lockdown. And I would again like to commend, we've been talking about the work of staff that's been going on during the pandemic, and I would like to commend staff in schools and in the centre who've been working really hard to make sure that we don't stand still. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things which I think will be of interest to you in the main part of the report. So if I could just highlight first of all for you 2.1.4, which is the work of the virtual school and of course our care experienced young people, and the really important work that has been going on there and continue to go on there to ensure that the experiences are of value, but of course COVID compliant as well. So I think it's important to note that whilst they've had to change plans, our young people have still been able to get out and have a vocational delivery based on their interest, and taking us back to that point about it being really important that the pupils' interests are obviously considered when we're devising any of our curricular programmes. And it's improving attendance, engagement and the mental and physical health and attainment of these young people. And I should note, of course, that's Alison and her team who lead on this. So I just thought it would be important to let you know that that important work is still ongoing. The next part of the report I would like to highlight to you is section 2.1.7, and this is the work that Anne and her team have been leading on, and again some really exciting and innovative work around the empowering clusters model, and that's when we now have identification of suitable health and wellbeing bases in each locality, which of course again very important, particularly in the current climate, even though the planning for all of this began before COVID. We have now appointed the Cluster Improvement Integration Leads, or SILs as we refer to them as. If you hear us talking about SILs, that's what we're meaning. It's nothing to do with Windows. And also our cluster support teachers, and each of them are aligned to clusters and working alongside social work and head teachers. And we'll obviously bring back reports on progress in due course, but certainly in the informal and formal meetings that we have on a regular basis with our education managers and head teachers, the feedback about their impact has already been really positive. So we're really pleased about that as well. Taking us on now to curriculum development and leadership. We've heard a lot of people talking about morale, and over the recent times for all of us it can be difficult to make sure that we're all continuing to feel motivated. So we've made sure that we'll focus on leadership of our colleagues. And indeed, you'll probably remember from a report brought previously that last session North Lanarkshire Council's Education and Family Service created a bespoke leadership framework. And again, this has been the work that's been undertaken by Anne and her team, linking obviously the Scottish Attainment Challenge and linking in with other senior officers as well. So our leadership courses have actually been endorsed by Education Scotland. And I would like to say that we're going to also put forward our new digital leadership course, which we've already had. I think it was about 80 folk had already applied to be on that digital leadership course. And again, we're looking for endorsement from Education Scotland. So it was just to give you reassurance that, of course, we're ensuring that we're developing the curriculum, but we're making sure as well that we're enhancing the skills of our professional colleagues to support the development of that curriculum. That takes me on to talk to you about the digital school. And you've heard me talk about that a number of times. Absolutely in the spotlight is online learning on a daily basis. We'll be getting requests, as you'll probably know, obviously, about what are we offering in terms of online learning. We've established our digital school, and we have got our digital school lead and 24 digital pathfinder schools who are working to support all of the online learning which is being developed across our establishments. What we're also doing when staff find themselves having to isolate at home, which obviously unfortunately we have had some examples of that, if they're well and fit, we're asking that they support the digital school by sharing the online resources that they're developing whilst they're in the 14-day isolation, so that we can pool our resources, just like one big school, if you like, from a digital perspective, so that when young people are isolating, they have obviously got the support of their own school who knows the learner best, but they can access digital ready resources which are there. And you heard me reference earlier about the recorded lessons. And again, we've got our Pathfinder schools working with other colleagues recording lessons so that we can be in a position where a young person can just press play at whatever time it may suit them and get a recorded lesson, much like colleges and universities are already doing. So I hope that sounds like something quite exciting as well. So moving on as well onto the next section, I would like to just reference the active schools, moving on to a different area. This is where you've probably seen a number of posts from Strathclyde Park, where our active schools coordinators, working really closely with the park rangers, have been enjoying all the experiences of P7s in Strathclyde Park, right on our doorstep here in North Lanarkshire. And you've probably seen them cycling, they've been in the loch, there's been all sorts of things going on across a number of our primary schools. And this has been part of a pilot programme and again has been really, really successful. What we've also been doing as well is working with targeted support with our active school coordinators. Again, this is really important for mental health and wellbeing with some of our inactive girls groups and just trying to support them around their mental health and physical wellbeing. So a lot of great work going on there too. So I'm just trying to give you a flavour really of things that have been happening across the piece. Moving on to an important part, it's not important, but it's certainly an important part of the report is to do with the 32 period week and the reconfigured school week in secondary and how we are looking to introduce this and consult with our colleagues, with our stakeholders, with our parents, and obviously most importantly with our young people themselves over the next period of time. So this is about the movement to, as you'll know from previous papers, to the 4.5 days with 4 longer days and 1 half day. Not decided, not set in stone as yet, but certainly the most recent informal conversations that we've had with all the above mentioned stakeholders seems to indicate at this point a preference for it to be the Friday. But obviously, whilst we're not obliged to do a statutory consultation on this, we would be taking into consideration our children, young people, sorry, I should say, and staff, and of course parents' views about that. In terms of the half day, we've got some really exciting plans, which I hope you'll feel tie in with the requirements that are upon us just now, even more so than before. We know that our 16 to 24 age group has been the most impacted in terms of employment opportunities, things like the hospitality sector, obviously having to close and jobs being lost. So we would like to focus on that afternoon, whichever one it will be, on employability opportunities, targeted support for young people, working with partners, private sector partners, CLD partners who are already working so hard with our young people, Police Scotland, also NHS Lanarkshire, where we've seen increasing numbers of young people showing an interest in these areas. In-house offers. Each school is unique in lots of ways, and there might be particular opportunities which staff would want to offer in one school that might not be on offer in another. Outdoor education programmes, and of course ensuring that we are continuing to support music and the arts as well. So these are the types of opportunities that we would like to offer on the Friday afternoon. If it is the Friday or whatever afternoon it would be for our children and young people moving from August 2021. So I'm happy, I think I'll stop there, and I would just like to ask that elected members note the progress that has been made over the last few months, and also look at the revised timeline, which is in the appendices, for the next period of time, and we would hope to have our consultation completed by the end of January 2021, and we have comms which are ready to go out as well, again working in partnership with the Pupil Forum, who we see as an integral part of developing the afternoon in schools. So thank you very much, and happy to take any questions, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Janie. I see 2 questions in the chat at the minute. Councillor McGowan, followed by Councillor London. Councillor McGowan.
Thanks very much, Janie. Thanks, Convener. This is a very positive, forward-looking report on the development of the curriculum using a variety of different teaching and learning strategies. I really commend you for that, and fully utilising digital methodologies. I particularly want to mention and praise the Pathways programme, previously Winter Leavers. All 90 participants achieved a positive destination. I mean, I think that is absolutely astonishing and fantastic. Even more positively, this is the thing that's more positive to me, because quite often youngsters get positive destinations but then don't last the pace. But out of the 90, 84 have sustained their positive destination. I think that is is absolutely to be commended. And this year there are 120 participants and 4 have already secured a positive destination. Now, having been a teacher and having been thinking of different courses for winter leavers, it was very difficult. I think this is to be totally commended, and I'm delighted that these young people have stayed in their positive destinations. The question I want to ask is an outdoor activity, an active schools, health and wellbeing. Now in 2.3.5 it talks about active health and a post-Kilbowie provision at Strathclyde Park, working with the active schools team and the park rangers. Feedback has been positive from participants. Now I know we're going to get a future report, and I was going to ask what the activities comprise, but Janie actually told us that, doing cycling, swimming in the loch. I hope they've cleaned the loch up. And, you know, the activities sound very good. But I just want to ask, when is it envisaged that a residential aspect will come into play, as I view that as crucial for resilience, independence and leadership skills? And I would prefer the residential in a more rural setting to take the youngsters out their comfort zone, rather than in Strathclyde Park, which is, you know, near to their homes, because I think that's a big part of it. So I just would like to know if you have any idea when that residential aspect will come into play. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, and I'm not sure if Janie will have that information at hand. Obviously, there have been discussions through policy and strategy and through other forums around, and I know obviously the park strategy was discussed at Councillor McPake's committee recently. I'll bring Derek in on that aspect of your question, but I think your point about the pathways programme and the winter leavers is one that's really well made. I mean, a tremendous success, and certainly something that we are absolutely determined to build upon, given the challenging times that we face. So thanks for those comments, Agnes, and I'll bring Derek in at this point. Derek?
A couple of things to say. First of all, throughout the period of the pandemic, and especially as we hit recovery, I've met every month with a parent forum, a sounding board of one from every cluster of parents, one parent from a parent council chair from every cluster of schools. We also have a wider parent forum, and I met them last week. And we also have met monthly with a pupil sounding board, and we've been talking about quite a lot of these kinds of issues and how to evolve them. And it is really important that they're involved in the design of future services. And parents have been very supportive of our programme in Strathclyde Park, and obviously I've understood that in the context we're in, that what we've been able to achieve there is really, really exciting. It is a pilot programme. We are learning some lessons through developing that, and we'd obviously come forward in due course as part of future planning with a business case for what we wanted to do. But can I just say, Councillor McGowan, that'll be part of the wider business case for what we want to do in Strathclyde Park, as part of that wider offering that we want to develop, because there is a very exciting piece of work being done with our colleagues in enterprise and communities through Nicole Patterson and others around the kind of park strategy, which I know you'll all be aware of. So it's part of that wider business case for what we want to do going forward in terms of opening up great experiences locally to the young people. And I do think that that very interesting proposition about the residential aspect is definitely something we'll want to think about and bring forward options around as we go forward, just to kind of enrich the experience. But at the moment, what we needed to do was to bed in a reasonably solid outdoor educational programme for the young people in the context we're in, based on the resources we had at hand. And I think the evaluations that you'll see when that comes forward are really very positive, and I think members will be reassured by it. And I can reassure you today that when we bring that, I think you will have that reassurance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. Councillor Linden is next. John?
Thanks, Convener. Quick statement and then 2 questions. First of all, Janie, an excellent report and really comprehensive, covering the whole gambit of areas. As you would imagine, I welcome the work of the virtual school. I'm sure that if you've got a bingo card here, Janie, you can tick that one off. It's absolutely the case that the work that was done there, but I've been aware of it from the outset, having met with the team very early on, is really quite something. And I think that for members, one of the things I'd like to see coming forward in future reports is, and it's mentioned in this around measures of success. I'd like to, there is of course the measures of success that we're seeing, but I think we really need to start to track that on a much deeper level. And I think for me, one of the key pleas as we track that success through virtual school is that the focus isn't simply on the outcomes, because they're important, but for the young people that are involved in the virtual school, the process itself is absolutely important in terms of the soft skills that are developed and the transferable skills that can follow them for the rest of their lives. And I hope that some of that stuff will be teased out as we move forward in terms of those measures of success. And secondly, one of the things about the 32-hour week that for me was a driver for its introduction, notwithstanding the opportunities which are there for young people to access a rich curriculum, an enhanced curriculum in terms of the opportunities that are available, but really it was about the opportunities available to our learning and teaching staff in terms of their own development. So how will we ensure that our teaching staff feel the benefit of the change, and in particular, how they can use it for their own professional development? And I think, crucially, the continued development of transformational practice. And I'm thinking in particular, and I asked that, around the role of the pedagogy team in supporting that work to realise that transformational practice and go further than what's already been provided by our excellent learning and teaching staff. Thanks, Janie.
Okay, Janie, do you want to maybe pick up on the second question that was contained within Councillor London's comments here, and I'll maybe bring Alison in on the first point that was raised. But Janie, do you want to maybe just pick up on the second part of the question?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, convener. Yes, Councillor London, obviously, whatever afternoon it is, it does give opportunities for staff as well if they choose to opt into the offers that are going to be made. And the pedagogy team, prior to obviously the situation that we're in now, was able to go around schools and to support staff in a number of ways. And obviously, we've been moving that on to an online provision, depending where we are in August. It may well be that we still are offering that type of online provision, which obviously teachers would be able to join, whether it's from school or another place, because obviously we have got that opportunity for our staff as well. So we're intending to have our head teachers really, who are absolutely key to this, and of course the principal teachers, many of whom are part of our professional network lead forums, to come back to us as well. That's part of the stakeholder engagement, and tell us what is it that they actually want to know more of. At the moment we know it's digital, and we have put in quite a significant digital training programme for our staff, which, as I was mentioning earlier, has been really well received. But there's so many other things as well that we have to make sure that we're staying on top of. So certainly through Anne's team, the Scottish Attainment Challenge, we've got our education support officers. At the moment, we're looking to recruit a digital inclusion lead as well. We will be linking in really closely with our secondary schools and developing a bespoke programme, which suits, there'll be universal things which we can do, but there'll also be some very specific offers as well. So that's how I would see taking that forward. And it'll obviously depend as well on where we are with COVID. But despite that, I think we would still be offering online, because so many more people can actually then access, as we've seen ourselves in recent months, and benefit from the opportunities we're going to offer. So I hope that's reassuring, but obviously I'll come back with more detail in future committees, Councillor London. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Alison, do you maybe want to touch on the outcomes in relation to the virtual school?
Yes, I'm happy to do that, convener, and I agree with Councillor London's point. Clearly, we do need to, and this year we've not been able to measure exactly the impact on attainment and on areas like reducing exclusions, etc. But ultimately, the engagement with the virtual school is much more than that. It's about, I suppose, building confidence for other aspects of young people's lives as well, giving them a more positive experience about engagement with a system of education, whether or not that results in them succeeding in qualifications. I think it's about what it does in terms of setting children up for moving forward with their lives. So we are very conscious of that in terms of evaluating success of the virtual school. We collect young people's stories. We're key that for some young people, it's been very important in stopping placement breakdown, because it has been able to offer that tailored support, and because of the sort of relationships virtual school staff have formed with young people. But they are a relatively small team. They can't provide direct intervention, nor should they, for all of our young people experiencing care part of their role is also to work with others and build capacity in the system, so that generally, other schools more generally are better able to support young people across the board, and you'll hear a little bit more about that when Anne goes on to talk about the ESN review as well, and some of the linkages there that are absolutely critical. But yeah, I agree with you. Our evaluation, our measures of success are broader than pure educational attainment outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Larson's advised it's the next agenda item she's looking to come in on, so there's no one else in the chat. Can we agree the recommendations that are contained in this really ambitious and important report? Great, excellent. Thank you very much, colleagues, for that. Takes us on to our next agenda item. I can get my pack sorted out here, which is the reconfiguration of our ASN systems and services. It's on pages 47 to 58. Anne Munro has done a lot of work in this area, again, linked to the really important work that took place as part of the ASN review group that a number of members of this committee were involved in. Councillor Burrows, Councillor Linden, Councillor Cathy Johnson and others, Councillor Castles. Again, this is part of the realisation of that work, and it's here for members' consideration. So I'll ask Anne if she can take us through the main points contained within the report. Anne?
Thank you very much, Convener, and good afternoon again, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to go through the key points of the report, which you'll see is a very, very detailed report. The report, as Convener has highlighted there, focuses very much on the approach we are taking to progress key recommendations from the ASN review, but also, I want to highlight this, the review of intensive social services for children and families. There are two key aspects to the report, and if I can focus on both of them during my introduction. One is to focus on strategic plans to reconfigure our intensive ASN systems and services, particularly to support our children and young people with social and emotional needs. Secondly, it's proposing a number of really key actions to improve the ASN estate. Certainly in preparing the report, our concentration was very much on the two reports that I've referenced, particularly the work around the ASN review, and really the opportunity which we believe this paper provides to strengthen the ASN system, but also to provide higher quality facilities across our estate. And really in doing that, I'll go back to focusing on the outcomes for our children and young people, which has been a key feature throughout this afternoon. Improving these outcomes and experiences for some of our most vulnerable children and young people. And I'm going to go back to the promise and the work that was referenced earlier, the phrase connections, integrating support, partnership, absolutely critical to the work that we've suggested here in responding to much more directly meet the needs of the young people who often actually face the greatest barriers to achieving their potential. The report, as I mentioned earlier, is very detailed, and I'll really just draw your attention to a number of key points, but very happy to develop them further. If I can draw your attention to the background of the report, and particularly two key recommendations from the ASN report. One which is recommendation 8 and absolutely underpins the work that we're focusing on here, and that is about strengthening partnership working. The second one is recommendation 11, which is focused on a clear plan for the future of the ASN estate. And you can see that ASN is clearly at the heart of provision moving forward. What I would also want to highlight in section 1.5 is the genuine partnership approach. That there has been, partnership is a phrase that we use, but we use it, with real confidence in terms of the work that's going on to develop the report right across services, not just within education and families, but across a whole team, across all the services who are keen to see work progress in order to provide better opportunities for the group of youngsters I've spoken about. Section 2.3 outlines, which I hope you will see as really innovative, exciting proposals to strengthen the system for children and young people who we would have previously referred to as our SEBN provision. But hopefully you'll see in the report we want to establish a new culture, move away from phrases such as SEBN and focus on all our children, all our young people, absolutely at the heart of what we were talking about earlier in the promise. And we're talking here about establishing a We Aspire college for North Lanarkshire. I think the terminology is really important to be aspirational, especially since we've just talked there about the Pathways programme. But it would be under the leadership of one person, an executive head teacher. And this would be a great leadership opportunity for one of our experienced and talented head teachers. As you can see in the report, it will bring together a number of existing schools, services and facilities under this leadership. It's a more dynamic model, and I think the really exciting aspect of it is an all-through model from 5 through to 18, making more effective use of our existing facilities, expertise and resources. And again, really providing a much more consistent approach to a clear pathway to employment and training for the group of young people that we're referencing here. The We Aspire College would enable the proposed alignment of Pentland, Portland and Fallside. Community alternative services would also be managed through this provision under this new arrangement. Willowbank wouldn't be, and I'll come back to Willowbank further on. We're proposing that the main base for the We Aspire College will be Coltness High School. An area of the school has been designed previously for a support unit, and we feel that that would be a really suitable area to host the college. But there will be proposals, or there are proposals contained within the report for an in-reach, outreach approach with provision in the north and provision in the south of the council area. Really excitingly, I want to stress that this proposal includes an alignment of all vocational educational activity within the college. That would include the Skills Academy and also the 7-day centre. And we really believe that this will provide a much greater partnership approach and a real sense of connectivity and direction, and a model which ultimately will make a difference to the young people and provide a better interface, and I do mean this really a significant point, between mainstream and specialist provision. Section 2.4 provides detail of the approach we've provided in order developed to provide higher quality, more fit for purpose provision for some of our children by the relocation of some of our existing establishments to alternative facilities. There are 3 main aspects to this. Firstly, we've looked at the reconfiguration of Mavis Bank School with a proposal outlined in the paper to relocate primary age children to a planned development of the lower mezzanine level, an absolutely fantastic facility within Drumpark Primary School. We've also looked at the creation of a shared headship between Fir Park and Clydeview School. You'll know that Clydeview School has not been without its challenges, but this would provide an opportunity to relocate to the Cathedral campus, taking over an area which is currently used as a community centre, the Daisy Park Centre, and it would become part of a shared headship arrangement with Fir Park Primary. And the third area is to address the reconfiguration of St Margaret's campus. You'll be very aware through previous consultations, Willowbank School moved within the St Margaret's campus area. Willowbank School offers a very different provision from some of the other provision that we've talked about in relation to the schools that will be realigning into the We Aspire College. And the success of the move of Willowbank into St Margaret's has really given us the opportunity to propose that it moves into the campus management arrangements with St Margaret's High School. I do want to stress the thread running right the way through here is the work that's been outlined in the ASN review and the plan for North Lanarkshire to empower head teachers. And I'm really excited about the leadership proposals that we have here for our existing head teachers and career opportunities, a fantastic opportunity for head teachers. But it's not just a head teacher leadership. Another key and again really exciting part of the report is developing a strong career pathway for key staff in our service, our support staff, by looking at a professional pathway to what we are calling our new learning assistant role. We've heard so much tonight about the model of 1140 and the fantastic work that's been going on there in terms of developing a strong career pathway, and that's what we would be looking at. We're proposing to recruit up to 80 modern apprentices and also to focus on employing more NLC 7 groups, and very much they would be integrated into our cluster approach. And this would give a real career pathway through and beyond the NLC 4 learning assistant post. Key aspects of the work will involve significant liaison and work with our head of communities, ensuring that communities feel very engaged and very involved in the process as part of the reshaping the service. And I have been working very closely with the head of communities on this. You'll also see from the report there's a clear financial impact and HR statement within the report. And again, it's really important to stress the significant ongoing work with our trade unions, ongoing work which has helped shape the policies as we progress further. So in conclusion, you'll see from the report that what we are looking for in terms of our recommendations are to note the contents of the report and to agree that we can move to consultation on the proposals that we've outlined within the paper. And also to note the further development of the modern apprenticeship role, which is absolutely key to developing the career pathway. And finally, to approve that a further report come back to committee in May next year following the conclusion of the consultation report. Thank you very much, Convener. Very happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that comprehensive summary of the report. I'll ask, I'm just looking at the chat here, Councillor Larson was the first in. Councillor Larson.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks very much. And I very much welcome the content of this report. I know that we want all children to get the support they need to reach their full potential, and I know that Derry Candy's team take very seriously the ASN review that's been happening, and I know that there's real momentum within the education sector just now to realise some of the content of this report and of course the review that happened, and also just taking another wee minute to recognise the cross-party work that happened within that review. It's been very important, and I also know that there's some extraordinary work that goes on within the ASN sector, and it's important not to make generalisations, but it's also important to recognise that we've still got work to do. And I'm looking just now at section 1.5 of the report that talks about some of the HMIE reports that came back as not satisfactory or below satisfactory. Actually, at least one of these is within my wards, and it's had issues in consecutive years. And so my question on this is, in this specific academic term, and maybe looking towards the next academic term as well, what have we done differently in terms of procuring staff placements for these specific centres or others like them? And I know that you've focused on the enhanced role of the ASN classroom assistant, but I'm thinking specifically of teachers. And then I'd like to ask a wee bit about the executive headship. I know that Anne, you mentioned opportunities for staff, but I sort of see it as a closing down of opportunities for staff when it comes to head teachers, because we're talking about a model, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I just want to know more about it. We're talking about a model that has an executive head across potentially 3 different campuses, and these are young people that have got hugely complex needs, you know, that might be physical or emotional or mental health related or whatever. If we have an executive headship model across 3 different campuses, who would be the most senior member of staff left on campus if the head was at another campus? I.e., would every campus have a deputy head? Would they have a principal teacher? Because we're talking about some small numbers in some of these, so I just would like a wee bit more detail about that. Thanks.
Okay, a few questions there. Anne, are you able to provide some reassurance around that last point? And then maybe if you can touch on the first point that was raised by Councillor Larsson as well.
Yes, Convener, thanks very much indeed, Councillor Larsson, and can I thank you as well for recognising and highlighting some of the extraordinary work that is going on in our ASN sector, and I think it's really important to be highlighting that, especially just now when times are particularly challenging. So I really appreciate that and thank you very much for it. Certainly in terms of the work that we are modelling around executive headships, the work that we're looking at, as you know, came through committee in May of this year, and work is already starting and is ongoing with our trade unions just now in order to look at what the model for executive headships will actually be like. And work on that will be progressing, and I'm really keen to come back and provide more details around what the conversations are and what the discussions are with our professional associations in order to shape a model that will best meet the individual needs of the establishments that you're talking about. And I do share with you absolutely what you're saying there in terms of the complexity of the needs of the young people in the school and the concerns that there may well be if a campus head is somewhere else in the building and they're actually not in situ. Particularly if I can focus on the We Aspire College, because the We Aspire College is clearly bringing together a number of schools in a range of different sites. So it's absolutely incumbent upon us to make sure that the support that is there, not just at executive head level, but the support that is there at the level below that is absolutely specific to meet the needs of the young people who we're going to be working with. So for example, I know the school that you're referring to, Councillor Larsson, coming across, some of the children may be working part of the time in the We Aspire College. Some of the children may be involved in other outreach provisions, particularly around vocational education. So it's absolutely critical as we develop the model, if we have the opportunity to do this, that we have a very clear line of what that will look like in terms of who will be responsible in each individual campus. If we take, for example, what's going to be happening in Clyde, potentially in Clyde View, moving into the Daisy Park Centre within the Fir Park School, that will be within the one building. And it will be the same within St Margaret's. But I think a specific aspect around this will be around what will be happening in the wider provision of the We Aspire College, because also there's services provided within there as well, because we'll be looking at community alternatives, we'll also be looking at Skills Academy. So the specific detail of what that executive headship will look like is something that we will be working through very, very carefully and very clearly with our trade unions. And I do think it's an absolutely critical question to ask. I hope that provides some reassurance. Oh, sorry, I see Derek's wanting to.
Hey, Derek.
Yeah, not to cut across anything Anne said, because I totally agree with that. Yeah, but there's a couple of specific things. This year we've done a lot of work with those schools. We've put in place additional staffing. We've had previous retired head teachers who've come back and done extra. We've strengthened it. We've had offers of additional support from HMIE. We've done loads of things with them. And indeed, actually, some of the management adjustments we've made for some of the schools, I think probably has strengthened strengthened them, and I think the officers have really focused. So I feel as though we were improving anyway, and the schools were on that improvement journey, but I think the structural change will accelerate it and really kind of enhance it and kind of move it to the next level. I was kind of interested, Councillor Larson, in what you were saying about the pathways and the executive headships. For me, and I feel as though, and I'm hoping members will see, and I'm pleased with what you said actually, because I thought it was very helpful, the introduction you gave, where you talked about that kind of past, and I'm hoping members see a golden thread through from all that cross-party work we did in the ESN review right through these proposals, because for me this is a start to fill out the gaps about, you know, how do we translate some of those broad recommendations into practice. But for the executive heads, in the ESN review we said we had 4 kind of broad areas we were kind of concerned about. One was about complex medical needs, one was really about vocational learning for ESN children, one was about early child development, language communication, and one was about polycurricular pathways. So what we're saying is we want to try and reach the best practice in the sector and allow those people to positively influence the system. And initially that executive headship wouldn't be like the campus kind of shared headship provision we're talking about, that Anne's talking about there. This is about letting those leaders who know more about it to influence the whole system and bring that experience to bear. It's interesting, Councillor Larson, I was contacted last week, I was consulted because Scottish Government are doing a bit of work on commissioning of leadership frameworks as part of the ESN review. And I was asked what we were going to do to try and kind of share that leadership journey. And I outlined to the person who's working on behalf of Scottish Government our plans. And I have to say, she was extremely interested and quite excited at the notion that this is how we would actually build around some of our able leaders who are most able to influence the system. So initially, Councillor Larson, executive headship is probably more, for me, about strategic leadership. Later on, in due course, if that's successful, of course, we would build up some proposals around about it. But then that would be dependent on how things go. And it may well be the case that we just leave it at that kind of the strategic leadership role, or we may want to build around that in future. But we would want to make sure that there was a framework in place, as Anne says, behind those colleagues that allowed them to kind of do that role. But you also understand as well that we've made a number of changes to the central teams over years, and that's actually kind of shrunk as well. So really this is about empowering our head teachers and releasing them. So hopefully that you feel that between me and Anne we've kind of answered some of those questions, Councillor Larson.
I do, Derek. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that, Kirsten. Councillor Linden.
Thanks very much, Convener. Just 2 comments and a brief question. First of all, can I just echo what Councillor Larson has said in terms of the challenging backdrop that the sector has had to work in, and you know, the remarkable success not only in moving forward with the implementation of the review, but in maintaining those high standards and quality. I think to be congratulated. I think the other thing to welcome is clearly the 80 MA posts for the integrated cluster wellbeing teams. Great opportunities for those who are going to pursue that particular work. My 2 questions really, and one specifically, I suppose, in relation to what we're talking about, and then one more generally around the review. In terms of one of the key things of the review right throughout was the role and the importance rather of the role of parents and guardians in the process. So therefore, my question is, how do we continue on an ongoing active basis to embed parent or guardian views, and crucially, and I think this is the most important element, is their lived experience. They are experts of their own experience in terms of their children, young people and themselves. And how do we ensure that they are actively involved in the implementation of the review's outcomes, whether it be on the estate, infrastructure, policy? How do we ensure that their voices and their experiences underpin everything we're doing, because we're doing it for them and with them in a style of co-production? And then secondly, my question relates to the policy element of the review process, which the paper doesn't fully articulate. The paper's very focused, but I was wondering when we would start to see coming forward some of the, I guess, the measures of success or the changes that we have seen realised as a result of the updated policy environment in which our ESN staff work in, whether it be on seclusion and exclusion and restraint, or whether it be on you know, the work that we've done around ESN curriculum, because there was a significant piece of work done on curricular outcomes, When are we going to start to see some of that coming through? And in particular, one of the kind of key outcomes that I remember all members being keen on the review group was when we start to see that training on the one approach start to be rolled out to all of the staff to ensure that we're all operating on one basis. When we're going to start to see some of that filter through into reports to life. And just to end, convener, I think it's important to say again, thanks to the officers who are continuing to implement the outcome of the review, a cross-party review, an excellent piece of work against a really challenging backdrop. Thanks, convener.
No, thanks for those comments, and I mean certainly there'll be ongoing reports to future committees in relation to all aspects of the ASN review and what that looks like in reality. And do you want to maybe touch on the questions that Councillor London asked?
I think Derek's going to come in for the first part of the questions. Thanks, convener.
Anne and I have agreed who's going to talk about what, and so I'm going to start, if it's okay, but very briefly, and then we'll bring Anne in. Two things, Councillor London. We were going to build a parent stakeholder forum, and we still will, or a wider stakeholder forum, but with COVID, we had to create some other kind of stakeholder groups. So we created an ASN parent forum. I've been meeting with them every month. That's absolutely fascinating, to be truthful, and we've just regularly talked to them about issues. Things like, transporting your child to school and the pros and cons of that. Things like how do we get better at communicating with them around about ASN placements. All those things that are important to parents. We have been talking to our stakeholder group and regularly meeting them. Anne and I meet them and we talk to them. It's a wee bit harder with the children because some of them that we would most want to need, you kind of have to get those views through their parents simply because of the complexity of need. But if their people have got any ideas about that, then we'd be happy to hear them. And of course, we have our pupil forum. So I would say those things first of all. And then I agree with you around about some of the things we need to see coming forward. But can I reassure you that when we come through the February committee cycle, you're going to get, and Gerard and I and Anne have been working on this, you're going to get an update on the self-evaluation that was done by all schools post the ASN review, the updates that have been done on some of the training around nurture, the rollout of our GIRFEC pathways, which is work that's just been completed now so we can train people after Christmas. That's been led by my colleague Fiona Swift in the Education and Families Manager for Social Work. And you'll also see some of the other developments that are coming through in terms of learning loss, etc. And Anne and I are kind of working on that at the moment. So I think you'll start to see that. And hopefully I've covered off the things we said I would talk about, but I don't know if you feel there's anything I've not covered or you want to come in on top of.
No, just specifically to come back in and talk about, we talk about co-production. I think that's an absolute key phrase. Councillor Linden, very, very supportive of that and the work that we've been doing with the parents. But also, Janie has already referenced the work that we've been doing in terms of our empowering clusters model. And I know that Fiona's work and the GIRFEC pathway filtering through into the empowering clusters approach will have a real key bearing on the training aspect and the work that we're doing in order to really focus on an inclusive approach for all children right across our system. So that's work that we are working on just now, and we're working with ourselves and our CSTs on that right at the moment, and very keen to bring back measures of success in a future committee, Councillor Linden.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGowan.
I'll just be very brief. I don't actually have any questions, but having served in the ASN review, which you forgot, Frank, my name wasn't mentioned, but it's all right. I'll not go in the huff.
Apologies. I was trying to do that from memory, Agnes, I tell you. I knew I would miss somebody. Apologies.
I'm easily forgotten. It's all right. Anyway, I enjoyed serving on the ASN review group, and I'm delighted to see the recommendations being implemented. A huge step forward to me is the integration of ASN and mainstream, and the possible transition in learning between the two sectors. I didn't realise, even though I'd been in teaching for about 35 years, until I served in the group, that head teachers from ASN schools met at different times from head teachers of mainstream schools. But that doesn't happen anymore. They now all go to the same meeting, and I think that is a huge step forward in itself. The fact that Willowbank is in St Margaret's and activities are joined at times. There's learning between the two sectors. Labels, as Anne said, labels such as ASN and SCBD will be in the past. And instead we have facilities called the We Aspire College. And the We Aspire College is in Coltness High, which is the school I taught in. So I will look at that with interest. I think people will be amazed in the future that terms such as ASN and SEBD even existed. So hopefully the eradication of stigma is nigh. And in my teaching career, I never saw children with support needs as separate, because every one of us in this meeting today will have support needs in some way. You might not admit it, but mine is threading up a sewing machine. But you will all have support needs. So I never saw these children. You know, I don't see anybody as separate. We all learn in different ways. Lastly, I'd like to commend the Strengthened Career Pathway for Learning Assistants and the fact that 80 modern apprentices have been recruited. Absolutely excellent and forward-looking. So great report, delighted with it, forward-looking, onwards and upwards.
Thank you very much for that, Agnes. Thank you for those comments, and apologies again for forgetting your involvement. Certainly unintentional. I'll bring in Councillor McPake.
Thanks, convener. It's one of these an absolutely brilliant report. I'll say that at the outset. It's one of these things that I've been watching from a wee bit of a distance here. Obviously, I'm on this committee, and the ASN report, ASN working group, watched that and very, very impressed by what the findings were. And the journey we're on now is exactly that. It's a journey. And it's absolutely brilliant to see. Speaking of somebody who was a parent of somebody who went to Drum Park, then it was Drum Park then, still got Drum Park Primary. One of the hardest decisions as a school board at that time was to go down the road of splitting the school up into what is now Buchanan High and Drum Park Primary. That was a very, very difficult decision. Looking back on it, I think it was one of the best decisions we made. And to see in 2.4.1 of this report, bringing Mavisbank children into the Drum Park setting is absolutely brilliant. I think that's fantastic to see that happen. But the one question I would have is and I think Jordan's alluded to it, is very, very important, is consultation here to make sure we bring the parents along, bring the carers along, bring everyone along, because it's a very, very, very big thing in a child's life when you're in Mavisbank School or any other school like that. Coming to a different way of thinking, different way of doing things. It's a very big challenge. So I would hope, and I've got absolutely no doubt that will be front and centre of anything that's done. And if you want any experience, come to old codgers like myself and ask. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Michael. And I see Anne nodding there. That's absolutely will be taken on board, both the points raised by yourself and Councillor Linden in that regard. Councillor Burrows.
Convener, just before I start, I've not got a question, I've got a comment, but just to clarify and maybe drop you in it a wee bit more, Convener. Also, Councillor Bartley was on the review, and I don't know whether I see Claire's got her name up. I don't know whether it's about that or not, but we were. I'll just go on, Frank. Just to say that clearly this is a very, very good positive report, and you can hear from Anne Munro her positive way of taking this forward. I've said this before, her enthusiasm along with her officers will provide, I think, a really positive progress on what we call now the ASN provision. And I need to say, on behalf of the full team that was on the review, and I think somebody said here earlier, it was cross-party. Whilst I chaired it and Jordan was vice-chair, everybody together worked well. And it really was encouraging to see. And even when there were people couldn't make it, they had substitutes in to make sure that we were taking this forward. It was clear, Convener, it was clear from the very beginning that the ASN provision as we've seen it before wasn't an integrated part of what we had in education. That's absolutely clear. But you can see, you can see already through this report, and members will need to mind there were 12 recommendations that came out of the report. This is only 2 of them. This is only 2. We've got a kind of a short, medium and long-term plan, but this is an exciting time about moving this forward. And I think in a few years' time, we'll be reflecting back, convener, and wondering, how did we not do that before? How did we not do that? So it's really good going forward. And I'm looking forward to 2021 and further on this. But just a final thanks to the councillors that was involved in that review. And I need to say, the senior officers, I know Derek and Anne and everybody else, all the officers that came to that all played a real big part in that review. And I need to say thanks to every one of them. But you can do a review, you can do a report. It's about putting things in place that matter. And that's the important things going forward. So thanks again, convener. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much for those comments, Bob, and thank you to every member, every substitute, everybody else I've missed off when I was thanking members earlier on for your contribution over what was a fairly long period of time, I've got to say, well, with a lot of meetings and a lot of real drive and determination to bring about change. So thank you for that. And Claire, I'll bring you in now. Please don't rib me like my other colleagues here.
I wasn't even going to mention it. I'm not that.
Oh, good.
No, it was a joy to be part of the review. The concerns that I think a lot of us had about this would be something we would all be involved in, and in a way that it would be paid lip service to, and there wouldn't be the involvement, and it wouldn't be ongoing, and there could be issues of, well, we've done that and it would be parked out of the way. That none of that happened, and that's a testament to everybody that's been involved in this, and also to the officers and Derek specifically on this, was the willing to listen, because it wasn't just that everyone was having their say and being there physically to listen to what was going on, but actually to really listen to what people were saying. And one of my concerns had been that during the review and the conversations that we had with all of the stakeholders, that a lot of that could be lost going forward if those conversations didn't continue. Now, as part of the 12 points, it was agreed that conversation would continue. But what I need to say is that really, that it wasn't just a concern about losing that. This has actually exceeded my expectations going forward. So I really need to thank everybody that's been involved in this for doing that. Also, I really need to note the Helen Delaney and her team at Redburn, who have got a good report. That there was Redburn, as the issues with Redburn were there were many and they were vast, and through Helen and her team for being able to basically turn around that a lot of what was going on in that school is testament to Helen and her team, and I really feel that should be noted, not exclusively, but obviously because I know the work that has been done in Redburn from the first visit at the beginning with the ESN review, although I'd been there before, but to what is going on in Redburn now. So I think that has to be said, but also to thank my colleagues that were on the ESN review along with me. As I say, it was cross-party, people left their egos and everything else at the door, and it showed the concern that we had for the children and young adults that were involved within the ESN provision, and how all of us wanted to make sure that we did better. So, as you say, this is only the beginning. and it's moving faster, and the everything that's happening within it is exceeding our expectations, and I'm delighted to see. So that really just was my comment. And yes, Frank, I forgive you for not including me, so you're fine.
Thank you very much for that, Claire. And to Willie and Agnes for their helpful comments in the chat. Thanks for that. And I think Derek is just wanting to add just a final word before we close this item. Derek?
No, I could say, convener, that I was also in the ESN review, but I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not doing it. Right. So, I just want to say, thank you very much to the members all the way through this. I think because some of the things that we're going to have to do will require us to work really hard with communities, work really hard with individuals to build confidence and trust around change, and we've known that. And this is really, really important in terms of how we do this next bit. So we want the members to be reassured. We will keep coming back and updating you. We're going to do that hard yards. I was conscious of Councillor McPake's wise advice, and I think we all know that this is really, really important work. And we're talking about a group of families and children who can often be quite vulnerable, and it can be difficult. And I was conscious when actually, at the start, when Andrew was talking about hearing the voiceless, this will be important as part of this piece of work. So this kind of takes us round in a circle, right back to that starting piece around the promise, and how we do this next bit and how it feels will be important. So these are things that will be on our mind when we carry forward the consultation. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and members for your contribution. You see the recommendations in front of you. Are you happy to agree the recommendations? Excellent, thank you very much for that, colleagues. That takes us on to our next agenda item, the Revenue and Budget Monitoring Report. Thomas, if you can take us through the briefly on the main points of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, convener. This is the Services Revenue Monitoring Report as at 16th of October, which is accounting period 7. The service is anticipating a full year overspend of £6.7 million. This total is aggregated from predicted COVID of £10.4 million, partially offset by an underspending core budgets of £3.7 million. At this point, we have only included COVID grant funding if it has actually been received by the authority and thereafter allocated to service budgets. As a result, we do expect the reported net COVID costs to reduce between now and the end of the financial year as the service receives its share of grant allocations in areas such as additional teaching staff. In terms of the COVID costs, the main contributors are ex-probationers to teaching posts, preschool meal voucher programmes, hub costs, the digital rollout, the preparation of school buildings, including signage and PPE, and reduced income. The forecast net COVID costs will continue to be reviewed through to financial year end in light of actual costs of existing and new programmes, updated Scottish Government guidelines and instructions, and confirmed grant awards. The underspending core budgets of £3.7 million is primarily linked to vacancy management, coupled with the instruction to all staff that officers should only be incurring essential expenditure during the remainder of this financial year. Before opening up for questions on this report, there was an earlier question, I believe, from Councillor McGowan on the costs of consortia travel. I can advise that for the last full financial year, which was 2019-20, consortia travel costs of £505,000 were incurred against a budget of £138,000. And I'm happy to take any other questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Thomas. Any questions or comments to Thomas on his report? No. Happy to agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you very much for that, colleagues. That takes us on to our penultimate agenda item, which is a contract in relation to the Befriending Support contract there on pages 171 to 174. Colleagues, are there any questions on this, or can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. Okay, thank you. And our final agenda item again is a contract below committee approval threshold from the head of assets and procurement. Again, here for information, are we happy to agree the recommendations? Councillor McGowan. Councillor McGowan, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, that's me on now. I just wanted to briefly say that I'm delighted to see Windmills and Real Time Music getting funded as training providers, as they're both excellent and offer real chances of employment to young people. That was quick.
Okay, thank you very much, Agnes, for your comments there. Councillor Linden, sorry, I nearly missed that there.
No, Convener, actually, you were right to miss it. I was just simply taking the mick out of Councillor McGowan. We were all ready to go there, and there's always one.
Okay, right. Listen, thank you very much, colleagues. Are we happy to agree the recommendations? Agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much for your attendance. If I don't see you before, have a lovely Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you very much.
Does this face look worried, Jordan?
Thanks to the Chair.